Welcome back to Any Recapped. Today we will cover the series, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Let's begin. In modern-day Tokyo, a 37-year-old salaryman called Satoru lives an ordinary life. He is mostly satisfied even though he has never had a girlfriend. Satoru meets up with his work colleague called Tamura and his girlfriend. While they're walking around, a hooded man suddenly appears and targets Tamura. Protecting Tamura, Satoru pushes him out of the way but gets stabbed himself. While he is bleeding on the floor, he hears a voice announcing that he's getting various skills just like in a video game. In accordance with Satoru wanting to stop feeling the pain from his stab wound and his body turning cold, the voice tells him he has acquired resistances against heat, cold, temperature changes, electricity, paralysis, stabbing and physical attacks together with pain nullification and a body that doesn't require blood. Before he dies, Satoru tells Tamura to be happy with his girlfriend. He regrets dying a virgin and wants to become a womanizer if he is reborn. After the voice says that he has acquired a unique skill called Predator and the Great Sage skill, Satoru loses consciousness. When he wakes up, he feels like he's in a void. He can remember his past life, but realizes he can't see anything, can't talk, and doesn't feel his arms or legs. However, he can move and feel rocks and plants around him. Touching one of the plants, he instantly absorbs it and realizes he was reborn as a slime, one of the weakest video game monsters. Even though he doesn't need to eat or sleep, he keeps absorbing plants because he doesn't have anything else to do. He finds out that his Great Sage skill enables him to talk to a voice that can answer all his questions. When he asks where the plants he ate went, the voice explains that he has a unique skill called Predator. That skill enables him to store beings and objects in his stomach, analyze them, and then acquire their skills. He can also transform into that object whenever he wants. Giving his skill a try, he analyzes the plants he ate and finds out that they are medicinal hypocute herbs that only grow in areas rich in magic tools, a material that makes up all magical beings. Because he has nothing else to do, Satoru decides to gather all the hypocute herbs in the cave and make lots of healing potions inside of his body. Afterwards, he starts gathering valuable magic ore, but he doesn't look where he's going and falls down a flight of strange stairs. Even though he doesn't feel pain, he finds out he can take damage. Luckily, he has the self-regeneration skill that quickly heals him. Suddenly, Satoru hears a deep voice talking to him in his head. Realizing Satoru can't see him, the voice's owner offers to give him the gift of sight if Satoru promises that he won't get scared of him and run away. The mysterious person has been sealed in the cave for 300 years, and he has been bored the whole time, wanting someone to talk to. Talking to him using his thoughts, Satoru agrees to the conditions and the voice teaches him how to feel the magicules around him, helping him acquire a skill called Magic Sense. Using his new gift of sight, Satoru looks at the owner of the mysterious voice and realizes he's a gigantic, scary dragon. The dragon introduces himself as Veldora the Storm Dragon, one of the only 4 true dragons in this world. Veldora tells him slimes usually don't have the ability to think, which makes Satoru something cowardly unique, a being with extraordinary abilities. Veldora also tells him that people from other worlds sometimes visit, but that he's the first known person who has been reincarnated into this world from another one. When otherworlders visit this world, they also always gain special abilities. 300 years ago, Veldora destroyed a whole town by mistake. A powerful female hero then defeated him and used a skill called Ultimate Imprisonment to seal him inside a cave. The hero also called herself a summon, which means she has been summoned from another world by mages and used as a powerful weapon who can't defy their summoner. Hearing his story, Satoru asks Veldora if he wants to become his friend. Veldora has too much pride to accept directly, but Satoru manages to convince him, saying he'll never return to the cave if he doesn't become his friend. Since Veldora is his friend now, Satoru wants to help free him from the cave. Using his Great Sage skill, he figures out they could remove his prison if they first analyze it from both the inside and the outside. Before they start, Veldora wants to give Satoru a name, since he doesn't have one in this world. He gives him the name Rimuru and explains that he gave him his protection by naming him. Veldora then tells Rimuru to make up a kind of family name for the two of them that will signify that they are equals. Rimuru comes up with the name Tempest, making them Veldora Tempest and Rimuru Tempest from then on. As soon as Veldora spoke the name Rimuru Tempest, Rimuru feels like that name became engraved upon his soul. The same happens to Veldora when Rimuru speaks his new name. Veldora lets Rimuru absorb him together with the ultimate imprisonment so they can both start analyzing it in order to break it someday. In the Great Forest of Jura, where Rimuru's cave is located, there are several countries. In the Kingdom of Bluven, a minister called Veryard and a guildmaster called Fuse are troubled because Veldora disappeared from the cave he was sealed in. They think the other monsters in the forest might unite and attack the humans. There is also the chance that the Eastern Kingdom will try to conquer the provinces surrounding the forest, since they couldn't reach them while Veldora was sealed nearby. Fuse agrees to do Variard a favor and investigate the forest and the Eastern Kingdom's plans. Back in the cave, Rimuru wanders around for days trying to find an exit. On his way, he acquires different skills, like the ability to swim and launch blades made of water. Encountering different enemies, he defeats them, absorbs them, and gets even more skills. Defeating a bat, he uses its ultrasonic wave skill to give himself the ability to speak. Several weeks later, he finally finds a huge gate. At that moment, the gate opens and a party of adventurers enter the cave. Rimuru hides himself, and while the adventurers go deeper inside, Rimuru escapes outside. While Rimuru is exploring the great forest and enjoying its sights, a group of goblins find him, having sensed an unusually powerful monster. The goblins' leader takes Rimuru to their poor, run-down village and asks him to help them. When the goblins' god disappeared a month before, the monsters in the area have become unusually active and started harassing them. Rimuru realizes the goblins' god was actually Veldora, who has been keeping monsters away from the nearby goblins until he absorbed him. Without Veldora's protection, the direwolves have been attacking the goblins with their overwhelming strength and numbers, causing the deaths of many of them. Their most powerful warrior, who was one of the elder's sons, died too. Seeing the goblins' situation is desperate, Rimuru seriously thinks about helping them. When they bow before him and offer him their loyalty in exchange for his protection, Rimuru realizes he can't decline any more and agrees to become the goblin village's guardian instead of Veldora. Visiting the tent where the wounded goblins are, Rimuru quickly envelops each of them in his body and completely heals them using the healing potions he made previously. After he does that, he tells the goblins they will need to build a fence for protection. That night, the direwolves attack the goblin village led by a wolf with a scar across his eye. The goblins' new fence stops the wolves in their tracks, and Rimuru tries telling them to leave them alone, but they don't listen to him and attack. The goblins, using bows and arrows, bravely protect their village together with traps that Rimuru has set. Underestimating Rimuru, the leader wolf runs towards him to attack him, but gets caught in a sticky thread trap. Rimuru then uses his water blade skill to cut his head off. Seeing this, the other wolves stop their attack. Rimuru announces that he gives them the choice to submit to him or die. When the wolves don't respond, Rimuru decides to absorb their leader's body. Transforming into a wolf, he again gives the wolves the same choice and uses the leader's menace skill to assert his dominance. Hearing his might roar, the whole wolf pack bows to Rimuru, having decided to submit to him. After a night of celebration, Rimuru gathers all the goblins and wolves. He decides to pair them up and make them live and work together so they can become friends more easily. Since monsters don't have names, Rimuru decides to name all the goblins and wolves so he can communicate with them more easily. He is surprised when all of them are unusually happy to hear that. He names the village chief Rigger and his son Rigger, after his older brother. After naming all the goblins, he moves on to the wolves. Even though Rimuru killed their leader, it turns out none of the wolves are holding a grudge against him, not even the leader's son, a wolf with a star-shaped patch of fur on his forehead. He decides to name the wolf leader's son Ranga and even gives him the family name Tempest. However, once he does that, he starts feeling weak. He realizes that giving names to monsters uses up magic energy, and he has to take a rest to recover it. 3 days later, Rimuru finally wakes up and finds that Rigard, the old village chief, suddenly looks incredibly muscular and healthy. Rigard explains that when someone gives it a name, a monster's rank rises and it evolves. All the wolves and goblins in the village evolved in the same way, becoming strong and healthy. The male goblins evolved into hobgoblins and the female goblins into goblinas. Talking to Ranga, Rimuru finds out that all the wolves evolved, even though he only named Ranga, because all dire wolves are united as one. Ranga even renamed the entire clan into the Tempest Wolf clan. Gathering all the goblins and wolves, Rimuru gives them 3 rules he would like them to uphold. They can't attack humans, they can't fight amongst themselves, and they can't belittle other races. Trusting Rimuru's judgment, the goblins and wolves accept his rules. Rimuru appoints Rigger as the goblin lord of the village and gives jobs to all the goblins. He forms a team for protecting the village and a team for gathering food. But he doesn't know how to solve the problem of building new houses and making clothes since the goblins aren't very good at it. On Rigger's suggestion, Rimuru decides to visit the dwarven country of Dworgen and look for skilled dwarves to help them out. Taking a number of goblins and tempest wolves with him, Rimuru departs towards Dworgen. On their way there, they take a break at the Emeld River. Rigger reveals that his late older brother got his name from a passing man called Gelmud, who was an officer in the Demon Lord's army. Rimuru once again asks Ranga if he feels like he wants to avenge his father, but Ranga is loyal to him now because he spared his clan and even gave them names. After 3 days of travel, Rimuru and his party arrive at Dwargan, a large trade city carved in a mountain, where humans, elves, and dwarves live together. Because he doesn't want to attract too much attention, Rimuru only takes Gapta with him, a small goblin who has been to the city before. While Rimuru and Gapta are waiting in line to get in, bandits appear and start bullying them for being weak monsters. Telling Gapta to cover his eyes and ears, Rimuru tells the bandits to go away if they don't want trouble. When the bandits don't listen, Rimuru ends up having to transform into his wolf form and use his menace skill to drive them all away. Unable to contain his power, Rimuru accidentally scares lots of innocent people, too, and attracts the attention of Dwargan's guards. Realizing Rimuru is at fault for the chaos, the guards throw him into the city's dungeon together with Gapta. Talking to Kaido, Dwargan's captain of security, Rimuru manages to convince him he didn't cause the commotion on purpose. Suddenly, a dwarf appears and tells Kaido that a monster is terrorizing the city, but they don't have enough health potions to heal their wounded allies. Getting an idea, Rimuru fills a barrel with healing potion and gives it to Kaido. Kaido takes the barrel and hurries towards the wounded dwarves, telling Rimuru to stay in his cell. When night falls, Kaido returns and tells Rimuru his potions help the dwarves defeat their enemy. As thanks, he releases Rimuru and Gapta and gives them something to eat. Rimuru tells Kaido he needs to find a talented craftsman, and Kaido agrees to help him. The next day, Kaido takes Rimuru to his brother, a talented dwarven blacksmith called Kajin. Kajin would be willing to help Rimuru, but it turns out he has gotten an unreasonably large Longsword order from a minister called Vesta, and he doesn't have time for anything else. Rimuru remembers absorbing a lot of magic ore in the cave he woke up in, and he shows it to Kajin, surprising him. In exchange for the ore, Rimuru asks Kajin to find him craftsmen who could come to the goblin village and teach the villagers how to make houses. Surprised Rimuru didn't ask for anything more, Kajin accepts his offer happily. In order to help Kajin even more, he absorbs and analyzes one of his longswords. After that, he uses the magic ore he has already absorbed to produce all the swords Kajin needs in an instant. Overjoyed, Kajin takes Rimuru to a bar with beautiful elven waitresses. Rimuru enjoys the elves' attention and has fun drinking with them and the other dwarves. While all this is happening, Gapta is still sleeping in the dungeon. One of the elf girls offers to tell Rimuru his fortune. Rimuru wants to see the person he is destined to be with, and the elf's crystal ball shows him black-haired girl who looks Japanese. Suddenly, the minister called Vesta enters the bar. Approaching Kajin arrogantly, he taunts him, thinking he won't be able to finish making all the swords he ordered in time, but gets surprised when Kajin tells him they're already done. When he sees Rimuru, Vesta is disgusted and spills a mug of beer on him while mocking him for being a slime. Rimuru does his best to stay calm, but Kajin gets angry and knocks Vesta out with a punch because he mocked his guest, Rimuru. All of a sudden, Kajin offers to leave Dwargan and go to Rimuru's village himself, and Rimuru is overjoyed. However, he quickly gets arrested for punching a minister and thrown into the dungeon, together with Rimuru and 3 dwarf brothers who were in the bar with them. While they are talking, Kajin explains why Vesta hates him so much. Kajin used to serve Gazel, Dwargan's king, as the captain of one of the Royal Knight Orders, while Vesta served as his assistant. Since Vesta is from a family of royals while Kajin is from a family of peasants, Vesta was jealous of Kajin for being a higher rank than him. One day, a project called the Magisoldier project that Vesta was working on went wrong, and he accused Kajin of it being his fault. Because Vesta had a lot of influence, Kajin was forced to take responsibility and quit the royal guards. Ever since, Vesta continues to hold a grudge against Kajin and does his best to make his life harder. Nevertheless, Kajin doesn't think Vesta is a bad person, since he is passionate about his work. Kajin thinks that if he leaves the country, Vesta might become a better man. This is why he wants to go with Rimuru to his village. The 3 dwarf brothers also want to join him, and Rimuru accepts them. The next morning, Rimuru and the dwarves' trial begins once the king, a large, serious dwarf called Gazel, appears. Since they're not allowed to speak unless the king allows them, Rimuru and the dwarves' defendant talks instead of them. However, he ends up lying about the dwarves storming the bar and assaulting Vesta while he was peacefully drinking there. Kajin realizes Vesta has paid their defendant to accuse them instead of defending them. When Vesta agrees with the defendant's testimony, the judge sentences Kajin to 20 years of forced labor and the other dwarves to 10 years of labor. Surprisingly, Gazel asks Kajin to return to him and serve as his knight again, but Kajin tells him he already promised to serve someone else. The king understands and exiles Kajin and the others, ordering them to leave immediately. While he is leaving, Rimuru notices the king looks sad. Afterwards, Gazel talks to Vesta alone and reveals he knew he lied about Cajun being at fault for the Magisoldier project's failure, but he trusted Vesta and waited for him to admit it. Because he destroyed the dwarves' relationship with Rimuru, who helped them with his incredibly strong healing potions, Gazel fires Vesta as his retainer. Vesta is shocked, but he says nothing to defend himself, realizing he has made a mistake. Ever since he was a boy, he only wanted to be useful to the king, but he chose the wrong path somewhere along the way. With tears in his eyes, he asks the king for forgiveness, but Gazel only thanks him for his service and tells him to never show himself to him again. Later, Gazel orders an assassin to keep his eye on Rimuru because he thinks he is a dangerous monster. Meanwhile, in a guild in the kingdom of Blumen, Fuse the guildmaster reports that there is no sign that the Eastern Empire is preparing to attack. In front of him are the three adventurers Rimuru saw at the entrance of the cave before: a fighter called Kavel, a sorcerer girl called Eren, and a thief called Yido. Fuse sent the three of them to check if Veldora is still in the cave, and they confirmed he disappeared. Their next mission will be to investigate around the Great Jura Forest and see what is happening with the monsters there. Outside, while the adventurers are complaining about Fuse overworking them, a masked black-haired girl called Shizu approaches them and asks to accompany them to the forest. Eren immediately accepts, and Shizu is grateful. A few weeks after they return to the Goblin Village, Rimuru shows Ranga a powerful new skill called Black Lightning. As soon as they arrived, Cajun and the other dwarves started teaching the goblins how to make weapons, clothes, jewelry, and houses. While Rimuru was gone, goblins from other villages heard about him and joined his village, expanding it from 100 to 500 goblins. Using his great sage skill, Rimuru finds out that orcs, lizardmen, and ogres are currently competing over dominance in the Great Forest of Jura. In order to protect the goblins from those powerful monsters, Rimuru accepted them and gave all names. Because Rimuru forgot him in Dworgen, Gobta learned how to summon a Tempest Wolf and rode it back to the village in order to escape from the dungeon. Rigurd was promoted from Goblin Lord to Goblin King, since he became the leader of the village elders who recently joined them. In the present, Rigurd, as the captain of the village's security, reports that he saw suspicious human scouts in the forest. In the forest, Shizu and the three adventurers are running away from giant ants. Suddenly, Shizu takes out her sword and envelops it in flames. With swordsmanship and fire spells, she quickly and skillfully kills all the ants. However, one of the ants gets back up, but Shizu is too exhausted to attack. Before the ant manages to attack her, a black lightning bolt hits the ant and kills it, making Shizu's mask fly away. Having killed the ant, Rimuru shows himself to Shizu and the adventurers and realizes Shizu is the person he saw in the elf's crystal ball. Taking Shizu and the others to the village, Rimuru and the goblins give them something to eat. After they finish the meal, they all formally introduce themselves to each other. The adventurers are impressed that Rimuru is the master of the village and thank him for rescuing them and giving them something to eat. While Shizu is eating, seeing her sitting style, Rimuru realizes she is probably from Japan. The adventurers' leader, Kavel, explains to Rimuru that they were sent by the guild to investigate the forest, and Rimuru lets them all stay in the village overnight. At sunset, Rimuru finds Shizu alone on a cliff overlooking the forest. Shizu realizes Rimuru is from Japan from the way he is talking and admits she is also from Japan. She tells Rimuru about her past. A long time ago, her hometown was in the middle of a war, and she was running away with her mother. Shortly after, some burning debris fell on her mother and killed her. Someone summoned Shizu to this world. In order to cheer her up, Rimuru uses a skill called Thought Communication to show Shizu his memories of living in Japan and how much the country changed for the better since she left. He tells her he wants to make this world one where everyone can live in peace, and she supports him. After Rimuru leaves, Shizu remembers the time when she was summoned. She woke up in a magic circle on the floor with an emotionless blonde man observing her. At first, he thinks she is useless, but then decides to give her body to a powerful fire spirit called Ifrit. Suddenly, a parrot monster appears in the room and announces that he will defeat the blonde man, who is actually a demon lord called Leon. In order to test Shizu, Leon tells Ifrit to take over her body. Using an incredibly powerful fire spell, Ifrit eradicates Konik completely. Satisfied with Shizu's results, Leon decides to take her in. Sometime later, Shizu sees her friend Perino in the forest together with a fox pup she rescued. When Perino takes the fox with her to Leon's castle, the fox starts growling at Leon as soon as it sees him. Thinking the fox is a threat, Ifrit takes control of Shizu, making her eyes turn red. Instantly, he burns both Perino and Pizu until nothing is left of them. Regaining control of herself, Shizu realizes what happened and starts crying in despair. In the present day, Shizu wakes up from a nightmare. Suddenly, her eyes turn red, but she manages to suppress Ifrit's influence. Later that day, Shizu tells Rimuru that she will have to go soon so she doesn't cause any trouble for him. She tells him her goal is finding the man who summoned her and admits that she is actually several decades old. When Shizu rejoins the adventurers, she suddenly starts acting strange and clutches her stomach. She starts screaming in pain, her mask breaks and light starts pouring out of it. In an explosion of fire, she flies into the air. Cable realizes that Shizu is actually the retired legendary hero of their guild known as the Conqueror of Flames. Seeing what is going on, Rimuru tells Rigger to evacuate the villagers. In a vortex of flame, Shizu's eyes turn red and she transforms into Ifrit, who summons 3 flying salamanders that start burning down the foundations of Rimuru's village. The adventurers know they are no match for him, but want to do their best to save Shizu anyway. Rimuru asks Ifrit what he wants, but Ifrit doesn't say anything and just throws a fireball at him. While the adventurers fight one of the salamanders, Rimuru summons Ranga and rides him. While Ranga is evading the salamander's fire blasts, Rimuru uses his Great Sage skill to try and think of ways to beat them. When the Great Sage skill tells him that only magic attacks will work on spirits, Rimuru asks Eren to fire one of her Icicle Lance spells at him. Absorbing the Icicle Lance, Rimuru analyzes it and learns it. Jumping through the air on Ranga, he summons a large number of Icicle Lances to create an attack he calls Icicle Shotgun, which he uses to defeat the 2 salamanders. However, the 3rd salamander approaches the 3 adventurers and self-destructs near them, defeating them. Rimuru tells Ranga to save the adventurers while he takes Ifrit on himself. Ifrit makes clones of himself that descend towards Rimuru. Using his Icicle Shotgun, Rimuru destroys all the clones easily. But Ifrit then makes a huge magic circle and envelops Rimuru in a massive vortex of flame. However, it turns out that the spell doesn't work on Rimuru at all, since he has temperature change resistance that nullifies fire attacks. Realizing he can easily beat Ifrit after all, Rimuru uses his thread magic to restrain him and then absorbs him, separating him from Shizu. Inside of Rimuru, Ifrit is helpless. A voice tells him he is no match for his friend Rimuru and that he will now have to face him. It turns out the voice belongs to Veldora, who starts laughing. The next morning, Shizu wakes up in a bed and thanks Rimuru for freeing her from Ifrit. She decides to tell him her whole life story. She continued serving the Demon Lord until the hero appeared. After a battle between the hero and the Demon Lord abandoned his castle and left Shizu there as a guard. One day, the hero came to the castle. We can see that the hero is a black-haired girl with the same mask Shizu wore when she first met the adventurers. Shizu did her best to fight her, but the hero was so strong she couldn't beat her. After defeating Shizu, the hero asked her who she was and why she was there. Hearing her story, the hero told her everything will be alright and took her in. She gave her her mask and told her it will help her resist Ifrit's magic. From then on, Shizu traveled with the hero, learning more about the world, helping others and fighting. After a while, Shizu became known as the Conqueror of Flame. One day, the hero left her but told her they will meet again one day. Shizu decided to become stronger and spent the following decades helping people who are suffering. However, with time, her control over Ifrit weakened and she got scared of hurting her loved ones again. That is why she decided to retire and become an instructor at a school for otherworlders in the Kingdom of Ingrassia. She was happy there and one of her students even went on to become the Grandmaster, the person who oversees all the guilds in the country. When she started feeling she won't be able to control Ifrit much longer, she decided to go on a journey to find the man who summoned her so she can ask him something. Taking a deep breath, Shizu tells Rimuru she has a request for him. She wants him to eat her just like he ate Ifrit. Since she doesn't like this world, she doesn't want to become absorbed by it and tells Rimuru her last request is to let her rest inside of him. Rimuru thinks about it for a second and accepts. Rimuru asks her what the name of the man who summoned her was and she tells him it's Leon Cromwell, one of the most powerful demon lords. Shizu admits she wanted to ask Leon if he acknowledged that she existed and if the summoned kids she taught could be saved and returned to their world. Rimuru swears to her that he will find Leon and ask him those questions. With her last breath, Shizu thanks him and dies, turning into an older version of herself. Having realized Shizu has died, Rimuru absorbs her. Inside of Rimuru, Shizu reunites with the soul of her dead mother and dies in peace. When Brigard and the adventurers enter Shizu's tent, they see a naked girl inside. When she turns around, they see that she looks like Shizu, with blue hair. Rimuru explains what happened and tells them that he turned into Shizu after he absorbed her. Since they are going away soon, the 3 adventurers ask Rimuru to turn back into Shizu. When he does that, the adventurers tell him everything they wanted to say to Shizu before she died. Before they leave, Rimuru gives the adventurers new equipment and armor as parting gifts. The adventurers are delighted and they happily go back to their guild. Rimuru and Ranga bury Shizu's body, and Rimuru swears he will find Leon Cromwell. In a dry wasteland somewhere, an orc collapses from exhaustion. A strange man with a bird mask approaches him and introduces himself as Gelmid, giving him the name Geld. He tells him he will one day take possession of the great forest of Jura. Back in the village, Rimuru finds out he can use all of Ifrit's skills now, including body double. He immediately tries it out and realizes he is genderless in his human form. He also realizes he can finally taste food again now that he can transform into a human, so decides to eat dinner with the others that night. Rigger returns from a patrol and tells Rimuru that monsters from deep inside the forest have been traveling near their village. Hearing this, Rimuru sends Ranga, Rigger, and the rest of the hunting party to inspect the forest. Later, Rimuru returns to the cave where Veldora has been sealed in order to try out the skills he acquired from absorbing Shizu. Among others, he received a rare skill called Degenerate that can merge different skills together and make new skills. He also finds out that if he wears Shizu's mask, he can conceal his huge magic power and make himself seem like a normal human. Suddenly, Ranga uses his thoughts to contact Rimuru and tell him his party has been attacked. When Rimuru finds his friends in the forest, he sees 6 horned ogres attacking them. Everyone except Ranga and Rigger were put to sleep by one of the attackers' spells. Approaching the ogres, Rimuru apologizes to them in case his friends did something wrong. However, the red-haired ogre recognizes his mask and accuses him of killing their friends, which is why they want to kill him now. Seeing they can't be reasoned with, Rimuru sends Ranga to take on the pink-haired ogre, while Rimuru fights the other ones. He first paralyzes the largest of the ogres with a spell, then restrains another one with his steel threads. He smashes the blue-haired ogre's sword with his body armor skill and knocks him out. While Rimuru tries talking to the red-haired ogre again, the old ogre cuts his arm off, even though he had his body armor skill equipped. However, Rimuru simply reabsorbs his arm and regenerates it, surprising the ogres. Rimuru decides to get serious and takes off his mask, unleashing his magic. He conjures a huge vortex of black flame and destroys a large rock, demonstrating his overwhelming power. The red-haired ogre, who turns out to be the leader of the ogre clan, realizes Rimuru is stronger than him but doesn't let himself get intimidated. Suddenly, the pink-haired ogre stands between Rimuru and the others and tells the red-haired ogre that Rimuru isn't their enemy. The person they are looking for is used underhanded to make orcs attack their village, while Rimuru is powerful enough that he could kill them on his own. Hearing this, the red-haired ogre is willing to listen to what Rimuru has to say. Rimuru introduces himself, revealing that he is actually a slime and that his mask is a keepsake of his deceased friend. The red-haired ogre takes a better look at the mask and realizes it's different than the mask their enemy wore. He gets down on one knee and asks Rimuru and the others to accept his apology. Having made peace, Rimuru takes the ogres to his village. That night, Rimuru eats with everyone and enjoys the taste of good food for the first time since he was reincarnated. Talking to Kaijin and Rimuru, the ogres tell them that orcs attacked their village, killing everyone except the 6 of them. Even though orcs are supposed to be weaker than ogres, these orcs came in huge numbers and were equipped with human weapons and armor. The red-haired ogre saw a masked person working with them and suspects that the orcs have started working with one of the demon lords. Since the orcs might become a threat to Rimuru's village too, Rimuru asks the ogres to become his subordinates and Yumeteo beat their common enemy. The next morning, the red-haired ogre decides to accept Rimuru's offer, on the condition that the contract lasts until they beat the orcs. Gathering all 6 of the ogres, he starts giving them names. However, as soon as he names them, he loses consciousness. Rimuru wakes up with the ogres gathered around him and sees that they now look younger and more intelligent than before. He named third-haired ogre Benimaru, the pink-haired ogre became Shuna, the purple-haired ogre became Cheyenne. The old ogre became Hakaru, the gloomy blue-haired ogre became Sodi, and the largest ogre became Kurobe. Because the ogres are so powerful, Rimuru spent all his magic after naming only 6 of them. In the middle of the great forest of Jura, there are marshlands where the lizardmen live. That night, the lizardmen report to their chieftain that the gigantic orc army has been sighted near their territory. The chieftain thinks that such a huge number of orcs could only be controlled by the Orc Lord, a unique legendary monster. Since the orc army is twice as big as the lizardmen's army, that chieftain sends his son, a flamboyant lizardman called Gabiru, to travel to different goblin villages and try to recruit them as reinforcements. In Rimuru's village, Benimaru also tells Rimuru about the possibility of an orc lord existing. Before the orcs attacked, a strange man visited the ogre village. He wanted to name all the ogres, but they drove him away because they found him untrustworthy. As he was leaving, he cursed them all. Benamaru says the man's name was Gelmud, and Rimuru realizes that Rhaegar told him his brother was given a name by someone called Gelmud. Meanwhile, Gabiru's party is traveling to different goblin villages and convincing their inhabitants to join their cause. On the way, Gabiru's subordinates are constantly praising him, leading him to believe that he could take over as the next Lizardmen's chieftain soon. A few days later, Rimuru starts giving Theogras different jobs. While Shuna is making clothes for the villagers, Sham declared herself Rimuru's personal secretary and bodyguard. However, Shuna wants to take care of Rimuru too, so they start a rivalry. Rigurd appears and tells Rimuru that a group of lizardmen has arrived in the village. Gabiru makes a dramatic entrance and tells everyone he will make them serve under him so they can defeat the orcs together, but Rimuru and the others aren't impressed. Rimuru wants to unite with the lizardmen against the orcs, but he doesn't trust Gabiru. Gabiru thinks Rimuru is deceiving the goblins, the wolves, and the others and tells them he will defeat him for them. Because Gabiru insulted his master, Ranga gets angry and prepares to attack. When Gobda suddenly appears. Getting an idea, Ranga tells Gabiru he will consider his offer to join him if he can defeat Gobda, and Gabiru arrogantly agrees. Gobda throws his spear towards Gabiru to distract him, jumps out from his shadow using the shadow movement skill and kicks him in the neck, making him lose consciousness. Turning to the lizardmen, Rimuru tells them he will consider helping them fight the orcs, but they won't serve them. He tells them to take Gabiru with them and leave for the day. Later, Soei returns from his patrol and tells everyone that the orc army is advancing towards the lizardmen's territory. While they are discussing what to do about the orcs, Soei tells Rimuru that a dryad is looking for him. Suddenly, a dryad teleports into the room and introduces herself as Trini. Since dryads know about everything going on in the forest, Trini reveals that they have noticed that an orc lord appeared. However, the dryad village isn't strong enough to take on the orcs, so Trini is looking for help from Rimuru's village. Benamaru reveals that the orc lord has a skill called Starve that allows him and his army to devour everything in their paths and get stronger from it. In return, they all feel an endless hunger. Hearing this, Rimuru realizes the orc's goal is stealing the forest monsters' powers by eating them instead of ruling over them. Trini also says that the dryads have confirmed that a powerful subordinate of the demon lord is behind the orc lord's appearance. Thinking Rimuru is strong enough to defeat the orc lord, Trini once again asks Rimuru to help her defeat him. Thinking about it and consulting the great sage skill, Rimuru accepts her proposal and all his subordinates agree to help him. Since Gabiru is untrustworthy, Soei offers to visit the lizardman's chieftain directly and ask him to fight with them, so Rimuru sends him there. Somewhere else, Gabiru finally wakes up. He realizes a strange man with a clown mask is with the other lizardmen. His name is Laplace, and he has come as a servant of Lord Gelmud, who was the one who gave Gabiru his name. He convinces Gabiru that his father is too weak to fight the orc lord and tells him he should go back into the marshlands and take over as the new chieftain. Meanwhile, the massive orc army is marching towards the lizardmen's territory. Before they get there, Soei arrives. He confirms the chieftain's theory about the orc lord and proposes that Rimuru's village joins forces with the lizardmen. When the chieftain hears the dryads have personally asked Rimuru to help them, he accepts the proposal, realizing that Rimuru could be a strong ally to him. However, he first wants to meet Rimuru personally, and he makes a deal with Soei to meet up in 7 days. After Soei leaves, the chieftain gathers his army and tells them not to attack the orcs until reinforcements arrive from Rimuru's village. He doesn't want his soldiers to die for no reason and make the orc army more powerful. 4 days later, the orcs start invading and the lizardmen defend their country, but don't attack the orcs straightforwardly. Suddenly, Gabiru appears and visits his father. He doesn't agree with waiting for Rimuru's reinforcements and thinks that his father doesn't know what he is doing. Thinking he can lead the lizardmen better than him, he forcefully takes over as the new lizardman chieftain. When he takes the chieftain's weapon, the vortex spear, he feels its power flowing into him. Meanwhile, Gabiru's subordinates have gathered every lizardman who didn't agree with the previous chieftain, and Gabiru announces to them that they are going to war with the orcs immediately. Meanwhile, the orcs continue advancing and the lizardmen ambush them. The powerful lizardman soldiers manage to kill some of the orcs, but then the other orcs start eating their corpses and grow stronger. While his father knows the true terror of the orc lord, Gabiru has no idea what he is facing.
This was part 1. Hope you enjoyed. Let's continue with part 2.
Last time, Rimuru wanted to join forces with the lizardmen to defend against the orc army, which is why he is hurrying to the marshlands to meet their chieftain. However, a lizardman called Gabiru has forcefully overthrown his father to become the new chieftain. Gathering an army of followers, he ordered them to attack the orcs head-on, unaware of how dangerous they really are. Rimuru, together with Ranga, the ogres, and a party of goblins, approaches the lizardmen's territory. Noticing a single female lizardman desperately fighting a group of orcs, Zoe helps her and defeats her attackers. When Rimuru and the others arrive, Rimuru heals the injured lizardman with a potion. It turns out the lizardman is Gabiru's sister, and when she realizes who Rimuru is, she tells him all about what Gabiru did and begs him to save her father and brother. Rimuru orders Zoe to rescue the lizardman chieftain, while he takes on the orc army. At the front lines, it seems at first that Gabiru's army is winning against the orcs. However, the tables turn onto some of the orcs eat one of the defeated lizardman's soldiers, making the whole army gain the lizardman's abilities and adapting to the swamp. The evolved orcs end up surrounding Gabiru and his soldiers, who gather in a close formation. Hidden in the forest, Laplace and Gelmud are observing the battle, satisfied with the orcs' results. Out of nowhere, the Dryad trainee appears, telling them she will have to remove them from the forest before they do too much harm. Summoning the wind spirit Sylphide, she attacks them with powerful wind blades that rip Laplace's arm off. Realizing Trainee's power is too much for them, Gelmud and Laplace escape in a cloud of smoke. Back at the battlefield, Gabiru is doing his best to fight against a huge orc general, but his attacks yield no results. When the general prepares to deal a final blow, Gapta and Ranga appear to protect Gabiru. Benimaru, Cheyenne, and Hakaru also show up, announcing their arrival with huge explosions of black flame and decimating all orcs in their way. At the same time, Ranga turns into his latest evolution, a Tempest Star Wolf. Using a skill called Death Storm, he summons powerful tornadoes that kill the orc general and all the other orcs in Theria. While Benimaru, Hakaru, and Cheyenne are using black flames and their swordsmanship skills to mow down huge numbers of orcs, Zoe rescues the lizardman chieftain. On their way out, they are confronted by a huge orc, but Zoe easily traps him with his wires and cuts him into pieces. Somewhere else, Gelmud is angry, observing Rimuru's ally stirring the tides of the battle against the orc army. Panicking, he takes off towards the battlefield, scared that his master will kill him if he fails. While flying above the battlefield, Rimuru sees Gelmud hitting the ground like a meteorite. It turns out Gelmud was manipulating the orc lord so he can create a new demon lord and make him his pawn. Seeing Gabiru, Gelmud gets angry at him for turning out to be a nuisance and attacks him, but Gabiru's subordinates stand in the way, saving him. Gelmud attacks once again, but Rimuru protects Gabiru with a magic shield. He gives Gabiru healing potions to heal his friends and takes Gelmud on. When Gelmud realizes Rimuru is much stronger than him, he begs the Orc Lord to help him, but the Orc doesn't move. Once he calls him Geld, which is the name he gave him when he first met him, the Orc Lord goes silent. Suddenly, he cuts Gelmud's head off and eats him. Having eaten Gelmud, Geld evolves into a demon lord. The ogres arrive and Cheyenne and Hakaru start attacking Geld, but he keeps regenerating. The other ogres, together with Ranga, all use devastating spells on him, but Geld gets back up. Eating one of his orc soldiers, he heals himself completely. Rimuru orders the Great Sage to take over his body and fight Geld instead of him. Controlling Rimuru's body, the Great Sage easily dodges the huge orc's attacks and cuts off his arm. However, the Demon Lord instantly regenerates his arms and starts throwing powerful balls of energy at Rimuru. Rimuru blocks them and creates a vortex of fire that envelops Geld, but doesn't harm him since he has fire resistance. Rimuru then decides to take control over his body again, having figured out how to defeat the orc. Turning into a mass of slime, Rimuru starts enveloping Geld, while Geld struggles to free himself. In the end, Rimuru turns out to be faster than Geld and absorbs him completely. Inside of Rimuru, Geld relives his past and we find out he was the king of the orcs. Since the orcs' territory was devastated by a terrible famine, he ventured out to the great forest of Jura to find food. However, he collapsed on his way there and was found by Gelmud, who saved him and started manipulating him from then on. Geld keeps struggling because he doesn't want the orcs to bear his sins after he dies, but Rimuru tells him he will take on his sins for him. Hearing this, Geld sees the dry wasteland that was his home turn into a beautiful green pasture and he finally feels at peace. With Geld's death, the effect of his starved skill ends. His orc army goes back to normal and they stop fighting. After the battle, Benimaru and the ogres tell Rimuru they want to continue serving him, even though they have fulfilled their contract with him. The next day, Rimuru gathers the representatives of all the races that were involved in the war against the orcs. He doesn't want to charge the orcs with any crimes since anyone would act like them if they were faced with an extreme famine. He announces that he has taken all of the orcs' sins upon himself, keeping his promise with Geld. The ogres and lizardmen are hesitant to accept this decision, but Benimaru convinces them, saying that this world functions on the principle of the survival of the fittest. Since there are now 150,000 orcs without a home, Rimuru proposes that the other races provide food, water, and living spaces for them in exchange for the orcs becoming their workforce. He wants to form an alliance in which all the races of the Great Forest of Jura can peacefully live together and help each other. Hearing this, everyone present agrees with him, and the orcs thank Rimuru with tears in their eyes. Trini proposes that Rimuru becomes the Chancellor of the Alliance, and Rimuru is nervous about it, but promises to do his best. After the meeting, one of the orcs approaches Benimaru and begs him to forgive them for destroying their village. He wants Benimaru to kill him in exchange for sparing the other orcs. Before the meeting ended, the ogres all got titles from Rimuru. Shan became a samurai, Hakaru an instructor, Soy a spy, Kuro a swordsmith, Shuna a holy princess, and Benimaru became the samurai general who was in charge of military affairs. Because he is a general now, Benimaru tells the remorseful orc that he wouldn't want to rob the village of a capable fighter and spares him. He tells him that he will be happy to serve Rimuru together with him. Rimuru, who was listening to this exchange, later names that orc the king of the orcs and gives him the name Geld, as someone who will inherit their previous king's will. In the next 10 days, Rimuru named all 150,000 orcs. He also gave the lizardman's chieftain the name Aberu. For the crime of treason, Gabiru is exiled from the Lizardman tribe, but he is allowed to take the Vortex Spear with him. His 3 most loyal subordinates follow him, and Gabiru tells them he will take care of them. In a mansion somewhere, Laplace talks to the demon lord Clayman, a mysterious white-haired man. Clayman has been watching Rimuru fight Geld and is curious about him. 3 months later, the orcs, under Kajin's leadership, finally finish building the houses. They even construct a sewage system and build roads, making the village resemble a city. One day, the dwarf king Gezel arrives unannounced together with a group of knights on winged horses. Since Rimuru has become a powerful leader, Gezel decided to meet him in person to find out if he is a threat to his nation. Seeing Gezel and his knights, Rimuru welcomes him into his city. In order to uncover Rimuru's true nature, Gezel challenges Rimuru to a duel, and Rimuru accepts. They start fighting, and Gezel turns out to be an extremely powerful warrior. Rimuru is struggling, but he manages to block his strongest attack. In the end, Gezel is satisfied with Rimuru and understands that he isn't his enemy. It also turns out Hakaru was Gezel's master, who taught him how to fight with a sword when he was a boy. That night, Rimuru and Gezel drink together and talk. Since Rimuru is controlling the whole forest, Gezel wants to become his ally and recognize his nation. Rimuru agrees to sign a treaty with him and decides to name his nation the Jura Tempest Federation. Rigurd then chimes in and decides that the city they are in will be known as the capital city Rimuru, making Rimuru embarrassed. 2 days later, Gezel returns to Rimuru's city together with Vesta, the minister who betrayed Kajin in the past. Even though he has exiled him, Gezel wants Vesta to use his knowledge and skills to help Rimuru's nation. Seeing this as a way to continue serving Gezel, Vesta sincerely apologizes to Rimuru and Kajin for his wrongdoings and asks them to take him in. The two forgive him and allow him to work for the Federation. At the same time, Gabiru and his followers also appear, wanting to join Rimuru too. Rimuru accepts them together with Gabiru's sister, who came because Abiru sent her to gain more experience and become Rimuru's servant. He names Gabiru's sister Suka, and all the lizardmen that came with her get names too. When they evolve, some of them look almost the same as humans. So he takes Suka and her attendants in as his apprentices, and Rimuru sends Gabiru and his followers to cultivate medicinal hypocute herbs in Veldora's cave. Vesta is also sent to the cave, where he will start working to find a way of mass-producing powerful healing potions. In Clayman's mansion, a playful demon lord called Milim is curious about Rimuru's nation and decides to visit him. Flying with incredible speed, she quickly finds Rimuru, creating a huge crater when she lands. She introduces herself and has no intention of hurting anyone. Unaware of that, Cheyenne, Soy, and Benimaru appear and attack her, thinking she's a threat to Rimuru. However, their attacks don't faze her at all, and she manages to defeat them all instantly. Noticing Milim has become bloodthirsty, Rimuru realizes he will have to calm her down. The Great Sage skill reveals to him that she has 10 times his magic power, but he gets an idea. Taking something golden in his hand, he pushes it inside Milim's mouth. Sensing a sweet and delicious taste she has never tasted before, Milim calms down. It turns out Rimuru gave her honey he found in the forest, and he promises to give her more Ishizwirs. She won't attack him or his people anymore. Milim is conflicted about admitting defeat, but Rimuru keeps tempting her until he convinces her to accept his conditions. Treating her as a guest, Rimuru shows Milim his city and introduces her to everyone. Because she is a famous demon lord, the townspeople are impressed that Rimuru managed to make her his ally. Since all she usually does for fun is fight, Milim is amazed to see how much fun Rimuru City's people are having and decides she wants to live there. While the people instantly accept her, Rimuru is confused, but he is forced to accept her too. In the Kingdom of Bloomin, the Minister Veryard and the Guildmaster Fuse are talking about Rimuru and the newly formed Jura Tempest Federation. They acknowledge that he saved everyone from the Orc Lord, but Fuse decides to visit Rimuru in person to see if he can trust him. In Veldora's cave, Vesta has managed to perfect his healing potions. Rimuru wants to start mass-producing them to sell them, but Kajin thinks they are too powerful to just sell them as they are. Kajin proposes they make a deal with the Dwarven Kingdom. He wants to produce and sell weaker healing potions which the dwarves will usually use. The dwarves would deliver the ingredients and Rimuru's people would produce the potions for them. Exiting Veldora's cave, Rimuru sees a huge explosion somewhere in the city. It turns out that one of the demon Lord Carrion's 3 Beasteteers, a demon called Phobio, came and threatened to take over the city. When he attacked Rigard, Milam got angry and beat him up to protect Rimuru's friend. Concerned about Carrion attacking the city as payback for Milam beating up one of his subordinates, Rimuru makes Milam promise she won't attack anyone anymore, threatening to not give her any lunch if she does. When Phobio wakes up, Rimuru finds out from him that Carrion ordered him to investigate a powerful presence in Rimuru's city, which is Rimuru himself. Since he can't do anything else, Rimuru lets Phobio go. Rimuru manages to bribe Milam with a new weapon, so she tells him more about Carrion. She admits that she, together with the demon lords Clayman, Carrion, and Free, used Gelmid to create a puppet demon lord, which turned out to be Geld. Hearing this, Rimuru realizes his federation could be targeted by the demon lords because he ruined their plans. One of the nations surrounding the forest of Jura is the Kingdom of Falmouth, which is a major trade power. From that kingdom, a team led by a silver-haired man named Yum was sent to the forest of Jura to learn more about what happened with the Orc Lord. Traveling through the forest, Yum and his party encounter Fuse and his companions Cable, Aaron, and Guido, running away from a huge spider monster. Coincidentally, Gobda and some other goblins find themselves in the vicinity. Effortlessly, Gobda defeats the powerful spider all on his own and leads everyone to Rimuru's city. The people from Bloomin and Falmouth meet Rimuru, surprised that the leader of the Jura Tempest Federation looks like a regular slime. Rimuru asks Fuse if the Kingdom of Bloomin would be willing to trade and network with his federation, mentioning that the Dwarven Kingdom has already acknowledged them. Fuse is impressed, but he still isn't sure if Rimuru is a threat to the humans or not. In order to convince him that his nation is peaceful, Rimuru lets him stay in the city for a while. He then asks Yumu to change employers and work for him, since he's a mercenary. Rimuru wants Yumu and his men to act like they are the champions who defeated the Orc Lord and that Rimuru helped them. By spreading such a rumor, Rimuru wants everyone to think he isn't a powerful threat, but rather a trustworthy ally to the humans. After seeing what Rimuru's city is like, Yumu understands Rimuru's goals, finds respect for him, and agrees to help him. Meanwhile, in Clayman's mansion, a pink-haired harlequin called Tyr reports to him about the situation with Milam. Getting curious, Clayman wants to find out what made Milam so interested in Rimuru that she would become his ally. Tyr also reports that one of the demon lords, Frey, doesn't want to be involved with the forest of Jura at all. Frey also told her that a legendary sealed monster called Charybdis is going to wake up soon. With an evil grin, Clayman gives Tyr her next mission, finding the location of Charybdis and taming it. That night, Phobio and his subordinates are sitting around a campfire. Phobio regrets making fun of the Jura Tempest Federation and realizes they could be a power filial to the demon lords. However, he is still angry at Milam for making a fool out of him and wants to take revenge on her. Suddenly, 2 people in a harlequin masks approach the campfire. They introduce themselves as Footman and Tyr, who came from the modern Harlequin Alliance. The 2 of them mysteriously offer Phobio a power equal to a demon lord, and he gets interested. They tell him he could defeat Milam using the power of Charybdis, the gigantic fish monster. In order to impress his master, Carrion, and get revenge on Milam, he accepts their offer. At the same time, in Rimuru's city, Rimuru relaxes in a bath with Fuse. Some time has passed since Fuse arrived, and now he isn't suspicious of Rimuru anymore. However, Rimuru's city is so comfortable that he doesn't feel like leaving. We find out that Yumu and his men left the city to build up their reputation as the champions who defeated the Orc Lord. Meanwhile, the 2 Harlequins lead Phobio to the cave where Charybdis is sealed. They reveal to him that Phobio has to take the monster into his body to revive it. Phobio is unsure about that, but Tyr manages to convince him to go through with it by telling him the seal will soon weaken enough for Charybdis to revive on its own. Venturing into the cave alone, Phobio is determined to get revenge on Milam. Outside, the Harlequins are laughing at Phobio for being knave. It turns out Clayman was the one who ordered them to revive Charybdis and then how to attack Milam. The next day, a dryad called Tria appears to Rimuru and the others and tells them that Charybdis has been revived. She says that it's heading towards Rimuru City and that they should prepare for it. Charybdis is the violent ruler of the skies, and he has died and come back to life many times. It turns out he is also the child of Veldora, having been created from a cloud of Veldora's magicules. Stir. In order to impress his master, Carrion, and get revenge on Milim, he accepts their offer. Milim is convinced she can beat the beast, but Rimuru and the others don't let her since it's Rimuru City's problem. Soon, Rimuru sees Charybdis approaching the city together with flying sharks he has summoned. The ogres, the goblins, the orcs, the lizardmen, and 100 knights on winged horses Gazelle sent to help prepare for battle. The Great Sage tells Rimuru that Charybdis has a magic jamming skill that weakens all magic in a 300-meter radius around him, which is why long-range spells barely work against him. When the flying sharks start nearing the city, Rimuru's soldiers work together and defeat them one by one. When all the sharks are defeated, only Charybdis remains. When all of Rimuru's forces attack it at the same time, it doesn't even flinch. Suddenly, a loud roar is heard and the beast launches its incredibly hard scales at everyone, leaving them no other choice but to desperately protect themselves. Rimuru joins the fray and uses a skill called Gluttony to consume all the flying scales in an instant. However, new scales quickly start growing back on Charybdis' body. Using the Great Sage's knowledge, Rimuru realizes that Charybdis has the skill Ultra Speed Regeneration, which enables him to regenerate all of his scales in just 3 minutes. Both Rimuru and his army keep attacking Charybdis, but the fight takes so long that the sun has already started setting and Charybdis isn't even close to defeated. Suddenly, Rimuru hears Charybdis cursing Milim and realizes that some other life form is inside of his body. He contacts Milim, and when she arrives, she sees that Charybdis is using Phobio as his physical body. To Milim's delight, Rimuru lets her fight Charybdis, since the situation turns out to concern her after all. Seeing Milim, Charybdis gets angry and attacks her. His attacks don't affect her, and Alan, she destroys him with a single spell. When Phobio falls out of the remains of the beast's body, Rimuru catches him, heals him. Waking up, Phobio immediately apologizes to everyone and takes responsibility, saying Carrion has nothing to do with his actions. He tells them that a pair of harlequins told him where Charybdis was sealed. Milim doesn't know anything about harlequins, but tells Rimuru that Clayman might be at fault since he is always scheming something. Suddenly, the demon Lord Carrion, who is a large demon with blonde hair, arrives to pick Phobio up. He gives Phobio a powerful punch and apologizes to Rimuru for the trouble his underling caused. When Carrion tells him he is in his debt, Rimuru asks him if he would be willing to enter a non-aggression pact with the Jura Tempest Federation. Carrion, who turns out to be the leader of the Kingdom of Eurazania, swears he won't ever attack Rimuru's nation, surprised that Rimuru didn't ask for anything more from him. Picking Phobio up, he leaves. After the great battle, everyone in the city celebrates their victory over the meat of the sharks they killed. That night, Milim leaves the city explaining that she has to go see the other demon lords, but that she will return one day. While he is sleeping, Rimuru dreams about a voice telling him to hurry to the royal capital and save a group of children there, remembering that Shizu told him about a school for otherworldly children in the royal capital of the Kingdom of Ingratia. He decides to travel there. He leaves Rimuru's city together with Ranga, entrusting his loyal subordinates to continue managing the city. The Kingdom of Ingratia is the home of Free Union, an organization that helps adventurers and that Yuki, one of Shizu's students, has established. After a 3-day journey, Rimuru arrives to the royal capital. Telling Ranga to hide inside of his shadow, he explores the huge modern city full of people. Locating the Free Union headquarters, he seeks the audience of Grandmaster Yuki, who is a plain-looking man. When Yuki sees Rimuru wearing Shizu's mask, he is immediately suspicious of him and attacks him with a powerful kick. Rimuru manages to block the kick and calm Yuki down, explaining to him what happened to Shizu. Soon, the two become friends over anime and manga, since Yuki is from Japan, just like Rimuru. Getting serious, Rimuru tells Yuki he wants to make Shizu's final wish come true and help her students. Wanting to help him, Yuki gives Rimuru a job as a teacher at Free Academy, where Shizu's former students are studying. Yuki tells him Shizu's students are 5 summoned children who were called into this world when different nations failed to summon a hero as a weapon. After they were summoned and thrown away, Shizu took them in and saved them. However, the children's bodies can't withstand the overwhelming power they received when they were summoned to this world, so they are expected to be in 5 years' time. Hearing this, Rimuru wants to continue Shizu's work and save the children somehow. As soon as Rimuru enters the classroom, he almost gets hit by a powerful magic blast. A boy called Kenya fired it, and Rimuru realizes all the children have a huge amount of magic power. There are 5 children. The boys called Kenya, Ryota, and Gil, and the girls called Alice and Chloe. Since they are aware that they will die soon, the children don't listen to Rimuru and they aren't interested in studying. In order to get them to cooperate, Rimuru threatens them using Ranga's presence. Telling the students that they will play a game, Rimuru gets them interested. Each of the students will have a mock fight against him. If they defeat him in 10 minutes, they win, but if they lose, they have to begin respecting him. We find out that Rimuru's real goal is decreasing the children's excess magic that is threatening to destroy them by having them fight him. The area Kenya wants to fight first, and he takes a sword that Rimuru prepared for him. When the fight starts, Kenya does his very best to hit Rimuru with his flame magic, but he can't do it. After 10 minutes without being able to score a hit, he loses. Next up is a quiet girl called Chloe. She uses water magic and imprisons Rimuru in a water prison, threatening to defeat him with blades made of water. However, Rimuru easily breaks out of the prison and Chloe loses. The next student is Gil, who fights using magic bullets. However, Rimuru blocks all of his attacks and he loses, just like the others. Next is the timid Ryota, who turns ferocious as soon as he starts fighting. Going berserk, he attacks Rimuru with enhanced physical attacks, but can't hit her and loses. In the end, an arrogant girl called Alice fights against Rimuru. She takes out stuffed animals and makes them attack Rimuru. Even though Rimuru recognizes she has great potential, the dolls can't harm him and Alice loses. After the last match ends, Rimuru looks at the children and sees that their magic energy hasn't decreased at all. However, he doesn't lose heart and swears he will save them. Showing them Shizu's mask, Rimuru tells the children that Shizu has entrusted them to him. Hearing this, the children tell Rimuru they trust him now. That night, Rimuru teleports himself to the forest to visit Trainee. He remembered that Shizu was also summoned as a child, but she didn't die from her overwhelming magic energy. Rimuru thinks the reason for that might be the fact that Leon Cromwell sealed Ifrit inside of her. He thinks that if he can make powerful spirits inhabit the children's bodies, he will be able to control their energy, and they won't die. Talking to Trainee, he finds out that there is a place called the Dwelling of Spirits, where spirits reside together with their queen. However, the only entrance she knew stopped working once the new Queen of Spirits appeared. During the following month, Rimuru is doing his best to find an entrance to the Dwelling of Spirits, but he has no luck. One day, he has a picnic with his students outside of the city. Suddenly, everyone feels a strange magical pressure in the air, and they see a huge sky dragon flying over them and towards the royal capital. Rimuru announces that he will go beat the dragon and protect the capital, while Ranga protects the kids. Reaching the city's walls, the dragon attacks them, but Rimuru quickly arrives and blocks its attack. Realizing the dragon is a lot weaker than Charybdis, he quickly absorbs it, leaving the nearby guards and a nearby merchant in awe. Later, Yuki tells Rimuru that a merchant called Mjalmil has invited him and the children for dinner because he saved him from the sky dragon. At Mjalmil's luxurious house, Rimuru and the children are served delicious food. The merchant is happy to be able to accommodate Rimuru and feels like he owes his life to him. It turns out Mjalmil knows everything about Rimuru since he has a trustworthy information network. Hearing this, Rimuru invites him to come to Rimuru City and teach the merchants there about selling their products to foreign nations. Mjalmil gladly accepts. While they're leaving, one of Mjalmil's attendants blesses the children in the name of the Queen of Spirits, and Rimuru overhears her. He asks her if she knows where the Dwelling of Spirits is, and she tells him where it is in exchange for a tip. Soon, following the girl's instructions, Rimuru, Ranga, and the children delve deep into a forest in the Republic of Ergracia, where they finally find a wooden gate cut into a massive tree. The children are scared of entering, but trust Rimuru, and follow him through the gate. Inside, they find a long corridor, and Rimuru realizes there are magic traps set that are meant to confuse travelers, but he easily protects himself from them. While walking, they all hear voices laughing at them. When Rimuru asks them to take him to the Dwelling of Spirits, one of the voices agrees to help him, but before that, it wants to challenge him. With a bright light, the voice shows Rimuru and the others a path. Following the path, they get to a dead end, but the lights then expand to reveal that they are in an arena. In the middle of the arena, there is a pink robot. The voice tells Rimuru he will have to defeat it if he wants to find the spirits. While Ranga protects the children, Rimuru faces the robot. The Great Sage reveals to him that the robot is actually a golem made of magisteel and has high magic power. The golem suddenly starts throwing punches at him, and Rimuru dodges them while thinking of how to defeat it. Finally, he first traps it inside a net of threads and then burns it down to a cinder using magic. Since he defeated her golem, the owner of the voice reveals herself, scared of Rimuru destroying her too. It turns out she is a tiny fairy called Ramirez. who is one of the 10 great demon lords. When Rimuru tells her he knows the demon lord Melem, Ramirez realizes he is the famous slime from the forest of Jura. Surprised, the children also find out for the first time that Rimuru is actually a slime, and they are impressed. Giving Ramirez a cookie, Rimuru becomes friends with her. She admits that she didn't really intend to hurt him and that she only wanted to have fun scaring him. However, she didn't expect him to destroy her golem that she did made using complex spirit engineering. Hearing this, Rimuru remembers Vesta's failed Magisoldier project and realizes that the dwarves and the elves probably worked together on it. Ramirez confirms he is right. She tells him the project failed because they couldn't produce a Magicore that could serve as the Magisoldier's heart. Without it, the Magisoldier couldn't withstand the spirit power, so it went berserk and fell apart. After that, Ramirez took the shell of the failed Magisoldier and constructed the golem that Rimuru destroyed. Rimuru asks Ramirez to help him meet the Queen of Spirits in exchange for constructing a new golem for her. Surprisingly, it turns out Ramirez is actually the former Queen of Spirits who fell from grace to become a demon lord. She also tells him that Leon Cromwell was a hero before he also fell from grace to become a demon lord. It turns out that Ramirez is the one who maintains the balance of the world. She tells Rimuru she is willing to help him summon the powerful spirits he needs to save the children. Leading them along a special route, Ramirez helps Rimuru and the children reach the deepest part of the labyrinth, the dwelling of spirits. Ramirez tells Rimuru that even if none of the spirits they call will listen, he can just take a part of a spirit's magical energy and make a new spirit out of it. She instructs the children to call out to the spirits, and if a spirit is interested, it will respond. First up is Gil. He starts praying and tiny sparks of light start raining down on him. However, Rimuru realizes that he only managed to summon inferior spirits and decides to unify them into a superior one. Using his gluttony skill, he consumes them, and using his degenerate skill, he manages to unify them into one artificial superior spirit of the earth attribute. Putting his hand on Gil's head, Rimuru transfers the spirit into his body and immediately notices that Gil's magic power is under his control now. Realizing Rimuru has saved him, Gil is overjoyed. Rimuru does the same with Alice, who gets an artificial spirit of the space attribute. When Kenny approaches the summoning field, a superior spirit with a light attribute arrives, since he felt something shining in Kenya. He enters Kenya's body, deciding to protect him until he is grown up. Next up is Ryota, who gets an artificial spirit with both water and wind attributes. Finally, Clove, who is strangely embarrassed, stands on the field and tells Rimuru she loves him before she starts praying. Shortly after, the earth starts shaking violently. An incredibly powerful figure in the form of a woman appears, and the great sage identifies it as a spiritual body rather than a spirit. Flying around the room, she kisses Rimuru and passes through him like a ghost. When it starts flying towards Klo, Ramirez tries to stop it, realizing the being is dangerous. However, the being manages to enter Klo anyway. Examining her, Rimuru realizes her magic energy seems stable. Ramirez doesn't understand what happened, but she knows that the being came from the future. She thinks it will be a big problem if the being is reborn someday, but Rimuru's only concern is that Klo is fine. Rimuru thanks Ramirez for helping the children and keeps his promise by making a golem for her. He even summons a demon to inhabit it. Later, Rimuru and the children return to the royal capital. Meeting with Yuki, he is able to confirm that the students will finally be able to lead normal lives. Having saved the children and fulfilled Shizu's wish, Rimuru is happy. Meanwhile, an ominous black-haired demon thinks that Rimuru has summoned, and now he wants to find him. Sometime later, the time comes for Rimuru to leave the royal capital. He hugs his students goodbye, and before he leaves, he gives Shizu's mask to Klo. Telling them they are always welcome in Rimuru's city, he leaves. Rimuru tells Ranga that he gave Shizu's mask to Klo because he felt it was the natural thing to do. While they are traveling back to Rimuru's city, a black-haired woman is secretly following them. In the past, in a forest somewhere, a dying woman and a dead man are lying on the ground. With her last remaining strength, she draws a ritual circle in her blood. When she finishes it, a huge vortex of red energy appears, and out of it emerges a black-haired demon. The desperate woman tells the demon he can have her soul if he makes her enemies pay, after which she collapses to the ground and dies. The demon laughs nonchalantly and tells her he will help her, since he has nothing else to do. Not much later, Shizu visits the kingdom of Philpwood's royal palace. Following a request to defeat a demon that has been summoned there, she enters a reception hall full of experienced adventurers. The kingdom's minister arrives and announces that 2 famous champions, known as the Silver Wings, have died fighting the demon. Hearing this, many adventurers want to leave, but the minister's guards don't let them, since they need every person available. When one of the adventurers gets angry, saying he isn't obligated to help anyone, one of the guards pierces him with his sword, making him fall to the ground. The other adventurers are horrified. But a lesser demon, he comes out of the man's body and disappears with a scream. The guards reveal that the real reason they won't let anyone leave is because some of them might be possessed by demons, just like that man. Suddenly, everyone's attention turns to a hooded man standing among them. The man accuses the guards of summoning the lesser demon themselves, just so they can manipulate the adventurers. He says his name is Black and says that he will kill everyone in the room until he finds who the demon everyone is looking for is. Hearing this, Shizu steps in front of him and decides to fight him. She takes out her sword and sets it ablaze, while Black reveals he has a glove with sharp, retractable claws. Even though Shizu is known to be powerful, Black has no trouble fighting against her, and they are fighting on equal ground. Casting a spell, Shizu unleashes a huge torrent of fire. Black survives it, revealing he is actually a demon with large black wings. He tries hitting Shizu, but her mask blocks his attack, ripping off his entire arm. Intrigued, he realizes her mask is a powerful artifact that surpasses time. Black decides to end the fight for the day and teleports somewhere else. In a room in the palace, Shizu remembers that Leon once told her about demons known as the progenitors, who are referred to by their signature colors. One of them is called Nor, which means black. Shizu remembers that the demon she fought was named Black, but doesn't think that such a powerful demon will appear here. Suddenly, a blonde knight comes into her room and tells her the king wants to see her. Entering an ominous underground throne room, Shizu sees the minister and the king sitting thrones. Taking a seat in the biggest of the thrones, the blonde knight introduces himself as a demon called Orthus. It turns out he is the true king of Filtwood, while the minister and the person everyone else thinks is the king are just his puppets. It turns out Black's mission was searching for demons disguised as knights. After he killed them all, he finally killed Orthus, completely freeing the kingdom of Filtwood from his influence. In exchange for Black letting her live, Shizu agreed to lie about killing him, so he can remain hidden. After this incident, Shizu continued her travels, thinking that someone else will certainly deal with Black. In the present, Black is observing Rimuru, since he's wearing Shizu's mask. Black would later be summoned by Rimuru and named Diablo.
This was part 2. Hope you enjoyed. Let's continue with part 3.
Last time, Rimuru traveled to the Free Academy in the Kingdom of Ingratia to visit Shizu's former students. There, he found out that the students' overwhelming magic power was threatening to kill them. In order to save them, Rimuru managed to fuse the students with powerful spirits, who then helped them control that power. We go back to 1 month before Rimuru left the Kingdom of Ingratia in the Free Academy. Having learned a teleportation skill from an air spirit he analyzed, Rimuru can now move freely between Rimuru City and the Kingdom of Ingratia. Since the demon lord Carrion became his ally, Rimuru prepares to send a delegation headed by Benimaru and Rieger to Carrion's Kingdom of Eurozania, while Carrion will send one to the Jura Tempest Federation, or Tempest for short. Standing on a podium in Rimuru City, Rimuru sends the delegation off, telling them to avoid conflict and do their best to get along with their new allies. In order to properly welcome Eurozania's delegates, Rimuru had a reception hall built, ordered Shunato teach the goblins how to prepare food for their guests, and had Vesta train some of the goblins as waiting staff. In a forest at sunset, the little girl is picking berries when suddenly a giant mushroom attacks her. Just as suddenly, Yumu appears and defeats the monster mushroom. It turns out that Yumu and his companions successfully established themselves as famous champions, while also spreading the word that Tempest is a nation of friendly monsters. A few days later, while Rimuru continues teaching the children in the Free Academy and also managing his nation, Yumu and his companions return. The next day, Carrion's delegation arrives in intimidating tiger-drawn chariots, and Rimuru and the others properly welcome them. Leading the delegation are 2 of Carrion's 3 Beastketeers, a calm woman called Albus and an arrogant tiger girl called Sufia. As soon as she arrives, Sufia sees Yumu and states that she hates humans and doesn't trust Rimuru at all. In order to show Sufia that his subordinates aren't as weak as she thinks, Rimuru tells Yumu to mock fight against Sufia. Yumu doesn't feel like fighting, but his men are fired up, so he gives in. However, when Sufia insults Rimuru one more time, Cheyenne gets angry at her and challenges her to a fight. Sufia accepts the challenge, and the two start fighting fiercely. While that is going on, Albus orders Grucius, the weakest demon in her brigade, to fight Yumu. Grucius isn't particularly eager to fight a human, but he listens to her. When Grucius and Yumu start fighting just as intensely as the other two, Rimuru realizes how strong Yumu really is. Realizing Thachi and Sufia are equally strong, Cheyenne recklessly summons an incredibly powerful magic bullet and prepares to fire it. Suddenly, Albus, revealing herself to be a snake woman, stops the battle. It turns out all 3 of the demons were just testing Rimuru and his men, wanting to find out if they are worthy of being Eurozania's allies. Having seen how skilled Cheyenne and Yumu are, Albus and the others are convinced of their strength and everyone starts getting along. While everyone is talking cheerfully, Cheyenne's massive magic bullet is still going out of control and she can't stop it. Before it blows everything up, Rimuru tells Cheyenne to fire it at him. Trusting Rimuru, she does it and Rimuru safely sucks it up using his gluttony skill. Having invited the delegates to the newly built reception hall, Rimuru, his friends, and the people from Eurasania enjoy some food and drinks together. When Albus realizes she has drunk all of Rimuru's apple brandy, she tells him that fruit is abundant in Eurasania. She proposes to him that they arrange a trade agreement so they can trade fruit from Eurasania for liquor from Tempest. Liking her idea, Rimuru calls forth a timid kobold called Kobe, who manages all of Tempest's merchants and puts him in charge of trade between Tempest and Eurasania. Kobe is nervous, but he accepts and immediately starts negotiating with Albus and Sufia. A few days later, the delegation from Eurasania leaves, but some of the people stay to learn new skills and techniques, since Phobio, who is currently in confinement in Eurasania, ordered Grucius to be useful to Rimuru. Grucius also stays in Rimuru City. Sometime later, Yu continues traveling and spreading word about Rimuru, while Benimaru and Rigard return from Eurasania. They are impressed by Eurasania's military, but the buildings and craftsmanship there are inferior to Tempest's. When he hears that Eurasania has huge fields full of abundant produce, Rimuru decides to send another delegation there to learn about their agriculture skills. When Benimaru suggests appointing Rigard the leader of the delegation, so Benimaru himself can stay in Tempest and continue defending it, Rimuru agrees with him. The next day, Rimuru departs to Dworgen together with the ogre girls, dwarves, Ranga, and some goblin riders because he wants to talk to Gazel, the dwarf king. While they are traveling, they see Geld and the other orcs repairing the road that was destroyed when Charidis attacked. Rimuru is pleased by their efficiency and gives them barrels of beer as a reward. 4 days later, Rimuru and his escort arrive safely at Dworgen. Kajin reunites with his brother Kaido for the first time in a while, and Kaido is surprised at Rimuru's human form. In the city, they meet Dorf, the captain of the Pegasus Knights that helped them defeat Charybdis, and he takes them to the king. Meanwhile, in Clayman's mansion, Clayman has been observing Rimuru the entire time and blackmails a nervous green-haired girl to do a job for him. In Dworgen, Rimuru talks to Gazel, telling him how much the dwarves and Vesta helped developing Tempest. Gazel is satisfied with the dwarves and Vesta living good lives in Tempest, but his face suddenly hardens. When Charybdis attacked Rimuru City, Gazel noticed the incredible blast of magic that defeated the beast and has been wondering what kind of weapon could do that. Nervously, Rimuru admits that the demon lord Milim helped him defeat Charybdis, and Gazel doesn't believe that the empty-headed girl he met before was a demon lord. However, he trusts Rimuru and accepts his words. Shuna enters the room and gives Gazel some apple brandy produced in Tempest, and Gazel is very impressed by its taste. When Rimuru tells him he got the apples for the brandy from Eurasania, Gazel can't believe he managed to make a trade deal with the prideful demon lord Carrion. He thinks that Tempest could soon overtake the kingdom of Falmouth as the biggest trade center. Rimuru remembers that Yumu is from Falmouth and asks Gazel about that nation. The kingdom of Falmouth is one of the biggest of all the western nations, but Gazel doesn't like their king because he's too greedy. The next day, Gazel and Rimuru gather all the residents of Dworgen to declare that their nations have become friends. Rimuru does his best to show that Tempest wants to be a bridge between monsters and humans, and the people of Dworgen give him a big applause. Satisfied with his performance, Rimuru visits the bartended by beautiful elven waitresses where he visited the last time he was in Dworgen. He also takes the goblin children with him, but tells them Shuna and Cheyenne can't find out they went there. At the bar, Rimuru and the goblins enjoy attention of the elves and have fun. Talking to the owner of the bar, Rimuru asks her to sell Tempest apple brandy and research how much people are willing to pay for a glass of it. On their way home, Rimuru and the goblin kids come across Shuna and Cheyenne, who take Rimuru off guard. It turns out that a dim-witted goblin called Gobzo told Shuna where they are going just because she asked him. Shuna and Cheyenne end up scolding everyone, and Rimuru tries to use his cuteness to make them girls forgive him, but it doesn't work. Satisfied with their trip to Dworgen, Rimuru and the others return home. In a town somewhere, the green-haired girl who Clayman sent on an errand meets Yumu and asks him to join his party, introducing herself as a powerful magic user. Yumu tells her he doesn't need a magic user, but the girl proves herself by easily defeating him with a series of spells. Recognizing her power, Yumu accepts her into his party and learns that her name is Myron. After his trip to Dworgen, Rimuru returns to the Free Academy of Ingratia. He tells his students that they have passed their final exams for the term and that from then on another teacher will take over for him. The students are sad, but he assures them that they will always be his precious students. Later, Yumu and his party, including Myron, arrive at Rimuru City. While Yumu is showing her around the city, Myron observes everything and realizes that both Tempest's military strength and its technological advancement make it a threat to other nations. It turns out Clayman sent her to investigate Tempest, and she joined Yumu's party just so she can infiltrate the nation. Yumu introduces Myron to Grucius, who is training with Hakiru and the Goblin Kids. When he hears that Myron beat Yumu, he is surprised. Yumu challenges him to fight Myron, and Grucius accepts. Myron isn't amused by all this and beats Grucius extremely quickly, burying him into the ground. After he gets up, Grucius decides to join Yumu's party so he can broaden his horizons and see other countries. Meanwhile, Rimuru has lunch with Mjolnir the merchant, who has been selling Rimuru's potions with great success. While they're talking, Mjolnir warns Rimuru that Tempest is on its way to become a major trade center, and that other countries, such as the Kingdom of Falmouth, might see it as a nuisance. Rimuru thinks about it, remembering how Gazel told him Falmouth's king is greedy. In the Kingdom of Falmouth, the king and his advisors are discussing Tempest. Ever since Tempest was founded, the number of merchants trading with Falmouth has decreased and their financial situation has been getting worse. A sorcerer called Raisin thinks the rise of Tempest is going to cause Falmouth's downfall and wants to do something about it before it's too late. However, the king doesn't think their army is powerful enough to go to war with them. The bald archbishop called Riheen tells him that the Western Holy Church also wants to get rid of Tempest, because they consider monsters an enemy of their god. Hearing this, the king gets an idea. If a citizen of Falmouth is attacked by someone from Tempest, the Western Church could use that as an excuse to have their Templar Knights join Falmouth's army. Later that night, Raisin gathers 3 other worlders that Falmouth has summoned: the violent Shogo, the calm Kuya, and the bratty Karara. On the king's orders, the 3 of them, together with a party of 100 knights, are to be sent to Rimuru City and cause a commotion there. The 3 other worlders are given the best food, clothes, and housing in exchange for listening to the king's orders, but Shogo and Carrera still hate this world, thinking it's boring and primitive. Meanwhile, Kiryu wants to use the war to kill the people controlling them and free himself. Sometime later, Yu wakes up on Myron's lap after he was beaten up by Heikaru again. He tells her he wouldn't mind waking up like that every day, and Myron feels her heart skip a beat, realizing she loves Yumu. However, she is conflicted because her heart is under Clayman's control. While Myron is walking through Rimuru City, Clayman contacts her telepathically. He threatens her into doing one last job for him, somehow knowing she has fallen in love with Yumu. Later, Zoe reports to Benimaru that a large group of knights from Falmouth has been sighted heading for the city. At that moment, Albus contacts Benimaru and tells him that Milim has declared war on Eurazania, and that they are going to be attacked in 1 week's time. In Thessaly, the 3 other worlders from Falmouth arrive disguised as civilians. Seeing the prosperous city, Shogo is angry because the monsters live better than them. In order to create a fake commotion, Carrera screams and accuses Gobzo of assaulting her. Gobzo doesn't know what she's talking about, but she pretends he pushed her to the floor, making the other humans present think the monsters in the city are violent. It turns out that Carrara has the Bewilder ability, which enables her to make her targets believe anything she says and do what she wants. Shogo and Kuya play along with her and start stirring the other humans up even more. Gobda arrives and, realizing what's happening, apologizes together with Gobzo. When Carrara continues claiming Gobzo attacked her, Gobda accuses her of lying. He says that Gobzo would never be interested in someone like her, which makes everyone laugh and relaxes the atmosphere. Carrara gets furious and uses her Bewilder skill to tell everyone to die. However, her ability doesn't work, even though the ones who hear it are supposed to die instantly. Shuna and Cheyenne show themselves and tell her they negated her ability. Shuna politely asks the 3 of them to leave, and when they refuse, Cheyenne tells them she will fight them. Shogo and Kuya aren't intimidated and prepare to fight. Meanwhile, Clayman tells Myron that her new mission is turning Rimuru City into an anti-magic area so that they can't communicate with the outside anymore. Clayman looks forward to a war breaking out and wants to make it more interesting. Grucius finds Myron and tells her she's been acting strange. When he mentions receiving a message about Milim declaring war on Eurazania, Myron realizes that wasn't part of Clayman's plans. She thinks that he might go berserk and destroy the whole city in his anger if Myron doesn't succeed at her mission. When Grucius tells her he knows she is a demon, Myron tells him he is right. Revealing her true form, she tells him that she considers him a friend but has no other choice than to fight him. Grucius guesses correctly that Clayman is using her for his plans, but Yu interrupts him, having heard everything. Yumi doesn't care that Myron is a demon and tells her he loves her anyway. Myron is happy at first, but then tells him the Myron he knows is a fabrication she made to fool him. However, he doesn't care and just hugs her. Suddenly, a violet light envelops Myron and she starts casting a spell. While she is casting a barrier spell over the entire territory of Tempest, the Archbishop Rahim is casting another one. Benimaru notices he can't contact anyone outside anymore. Meanwhile, Cheyenne fights Shogo, until she suddenly loses strength in her body and falls to her knees. In Ingracia, Rimuru finally leaves his students. While he's traveling, Rimuru feels a strange presence and orders Ranga to hide inside his shadow. The Great Sage tells him he has been enclosed within a barrier, and he can't use any of his spatial skills to get out. Out of nowhere, an image of Zoe looking wounded appears and tells Rimuru the Tempest has been attacked before disappearing. Using his resist skill, Rimuru manages to counter the barrier to some degree, but the Great Sage tells him his skills will still be weaker than usual. Suddenly, the black-haired woman who has been following him before appears and Rimuru realizes she put up the barrier around him. Rimuru tries greeting the woman politely and acting oblivious, but she already knows he is the leader of Tempest. She simply tells him his city stands in her way and that she is going to destroy it. In Rimuru's city, Kiwia fights against Gobda and overpowers him. Before he can kill him, Hakaru arrives and deflects his sword. The two start fighting, but Kiwia turns out stronger since one of the barriers weakens monsters and Hakaru isn't able to use his full strength. Finally, Kiwia cuts him and defeats him. After that, he starts approaching Shuna, but Gobzo stands in his way to protect her. However, Kiwia just lost and swings his sword down on him. Nearby, Cheyenne continues fighting fiercely against the arrogant Shogo, but she is also weakened. When the knights from Felmuth arrive, Shogo leaves her to them, claiming she attacked him first. The knights rush into the city, their captain called Fulgen announcing that they're going to save the innocent humans from the monsters. Seeing a lone goblin girl in the way of the horses, Cheyenne runs toward her to rescue her. Meanwhile, the black-haired woman introduces herself to Rimuru as Hinata Sakaguchi, the captain of the Holy Knights in the Holy Empire of Lubelius. Rimuru then realizes he recognizes her name. Even though Rimuru just wants to talk, Hinata attacks him, not caring what a monster has to say. She thinks Rimuru killed Shizu, and she wants to avenge her. While doing his best to dodge Hinata's powerful attacks, Rimuru gets hit and realizes his pain nullification doesn't work anymore, just like most of his other skills. The Great Sage tells him that her attack called Dead End Rainbow don't affect the physical body, but rather the spiritual body of her target, and that only 3 more attacks will kill him. As they continue fighting, Rimuru gets hit 2 more times. Hinata tells him Shizu was the only person who was kind towards her and swears she will avenge her. Rimuru realizes that someone must have told her that Rimuru killed Shizu and made him out to be a horrible monster. Rimuru finally decides to counterattack, but Hinata perfectly predicts every one of his attacks and blocks them, making them useless. However, Rimuru doesn't give and gets an idea. He calls Ifrit from his body and attacks Hinata together with him, but Hinata once again dodges and blocks all the attacks. Suddenly, Ifrit starts screaming in pain and Rimuru is forced to call them back. It turns out Hinata has a skill called Usurper that allows her to steal her opponent's skills. She tried to steal Ifrit, but Rimuru called him back in the nick of time. Realizing he will die if he doesn't fight back, Rimuru tells Hinata that he has no choice but to defeat her. He uses his Gluttony skill at the same time as Hinata uses her Dead End Rainbow attack. Losing consciousness, Rimuru absorbs Hinata's sword and turns into a strange monster. Hinata tries restraining him using a barrier, but he quickly breaks it. Hinata then summons 5 spirits and uses them to perform a complicated spell that is supposed to disintegrate Rimuru completely. After casting the immensely powerful spell, Hinata sees that there is nothing left of Rimuru and leaves, thinking she has killed him. However, it turned out Rimuru is still alive. In the middle of the fight, he made a clone of himself and hid himself in a patch of grass, while Hinata fought his fake body. Summoning Ranga back out of his shadow, Rimuru prepares to return to Rimuru's city. However, the Great Sage tells him he can't teleport there because the city has been isolated from the rest of the world by a barrier. Instead, he teleports himself to Veldora's cave and meets Vesta, Gabiru, Soi, and his ninja squad. Nobody knows has been happening in Tempest since it has been completely cut off from the rest of the world. Soi saw the army of the Kingdom of Falmouth approach the city, so he concludes that they raised the barrier. Leaving the cave, they all go inspect the barrier. Rimuru finds out the barrier is a multi-layered barrier, consisting of 1 anti-magic barrier from the inside and 1 barrier that reduces magic density from the outside. While he goes after the one casting the anti-magic barrier, he tells Soi and the others to find the person casting the other barrier. Passing through the 2 barriers, Rimuru enters the burning city full of wounded citizens. He finds Rigurd and Kaijin, but gets distracted when he hears Benimaru fighting against someone. In an alley, Benimaru is trying to capture Myron, but Gracious and Yunu are protecting her. When Yu was knocked out, Gracious turns into a wolfman and attacks Benimaru, but Benimaru easily defeats him. At that moment, Rimuru joins them and stops the fight. Rimuru finds out that Myron is the one who cast the anti-magic barrier spell. Yu bows before Rimuru and apologizes for betraying him, but explains that he wants to protect Myron. Myron doesn't want Yu to stand up for her and regrets helping Clayman start the war. She leads Rimuru to the plaza where there are dozens of dead citizens' bodies laid on the floor. One of the goblins says that everything is Rimuru's fault because he established the rule that the citizens of Tempest can attack humans. Rimuru starts thinking that Goblin is right, but does his best to calm down and look at the situation rationally. He invites everyone, including Myron, into the meeting room. Before the knights left, their captain called Fulgen announced that they will return in a week after they have consulted with the Western Holy Church about what they will do with Tempest. Hearing this, Rimuru concludes that Falmouth and the church have been working together from the beginning. He tells Mjalmil to notify the Kingdom of Blumen about Falmouth's attack, and then asks Myron to tell him everything about herself. Myron tells him Clayman is her master, and that he has complete control over her, since he stole her heart using his ability called Marionette Heart. Having heard enough, Rimuru sends her into confinement. Benimaru then leads him to see the wounded. Visiting Hakaru and Gapta, Rimuru finds out Thathiling potions can't heal their wounds since they were inflicted by Kyuya's spatial skills. However, Rimuru manages to absorb the spatial magic with his gluttony skill and heal the two of them. Suddenly, Rimuru realizes Shion is nowhere to be seen and asks the others where she is. Everyone turns silent and they bring Rimuru back to the plaza. Rimuru sees Shion's dead body among the others and Gapta finds out that Gobzo has also died. Rimuru gets incredibly angry for a second, but manages to hold back enough to tell the others he needs to be alone for a while. Rimuru replicates Shizu's mask from his memory and puts it on. Feeling confused, he wonders if he was wrong about involving his nation with the monsters. Just before he decides to lay the deceased citizens to rest, the three adventurers Cable, Aaron, and Guido arrive and stop him. Aaron tells him there's a fairy tale about bringing the dead back to life and he gets interested. He doesn't want to get his hopes up for nothing, but decides to listen to her. As the sun rises, he finally finds a ray of hope. At that moment, Zoe notices the Western Holy Church's forces camping around the city on all sides. He notices that each team is guarding some kind of magic device and concludes that the devices are the source of the remaining barrier. He contacts Rimuru, but he tells him to just continue observing them for now. At the plaza, Aaron starts telling Rimuru the fairy tale, which is a story from the country of Thalion. The story is about the dragon princess, who was the daughter of a human and a dragon. One day, her father made a clone of himself in the form of a baby dragon and gave it to her as a companion. The two of them love each other, but one day the evil king killed the baby dragon in order to control the princess. The princess went mad with grief and destroyed the king and his entire nation, numbering thousands of people, which made her become a demon lord. Miraculously, when she became a demon lord, the baby dragon came back to life. However, it has lost its soul, so it came back as an evil monster that destroyed everything in her path. The princess was then forced to seal the dragon, even though it hurt her deeply. Hearing the story, Rimuru realizes he could become a demon lord to revive his friends. He could even restore their souls, since there is a small possibility that the souls are held back by the two barriers. Aaron reveals that her full name is Arion Grimwald, and that she is the princess of the royal family of the sorceress dynasty of Thalion. It also turns out that Cable and Guido are actually her guards that left the country with her when she left because she wanted to experience the freedom of adventuring. She says that if Rimuru became a demon lord in the same way as the princess in the fairy tale, the people from Thalion could realize she was involved, but she doesn't care since she wants to save the people of Rimuru City. At that moment, Zoe reports that 20,000 men from Falmouth and the Western Holy Church are marching in the direction of the city. Rimuru visits Myron, who is together with Grucius and Yu, and bluntly tells her she will have to die as a punishment. As soon as he hears that, Grucius tries attacking Rimuru, but Benimaru stops. Realizing she will die, Myron kisses Yu and tells him he was the only man she ever loved. When Yu tries stopping Rimuru, he simply restrains him with a spell. Yu begs Rimuru not to kill Myron, but Rimuru coldly pierces her chest with his hand, leaving Yu in despair. After a few seconds, Myron is suddenly alive again, to Yu's relief. It turns out that Rimuru realized the artificial heart Clayman implanted into Myron contained a listening device, so he destroyed it and replaced it with a new artificial heart, freeing her from Clayman's influence. When Rimuru asks Myron to help him bring his friends back to life, she accepts, thankful to him for giving her freedom. Rimuru then asks Yumu for an unexpected favor. He wants him to become the new king of Falmouth. After Rimuru wipes out Falmouth's entire army, he wants Yumu to replace the current king and establish diplomatic relations with Tempest. Yumu is shocked, but the others support him and he agrees to do it. Later, Rimuru gathers his most trustworthy subordinates and holds a meeting. Immediately, he declares to everyone that he wants to become a demon lord. The others are speechless at first, but Rimuru explains that he is doing it for a chance to revive their fallen friends, and they start understanding him. For the first time, Rimuru admits that he is actually a reincarnated human from the same world as the Otherworlders. He thinks that he could have protected everyone if he didn't spend so much time in Gracia with the Otherworlder children. But the others agree that they are actually to blame for relying too much on him to protect them. They all want to follow him whatever he decides to do and don't care if he's a former human either. Kajin then asks how they should treat the humans from now on. Rimuru tells him humans can be both good and evil, and thinks it depends on their environment. This is why he wants to create an environment where humans can learn to be good neighbors to the monsters so they can all live together in peace.
This was part 3. Hope you enjoyed. Let's continue with the final part 4.
Last time, the Kingdom of Falmouth, together with the Western Holy Church, demolished Tempest and killed many of Rimuru's friends. Having killed all the attackers and absorbed their souls, Rimuru managed to evolve into a demon lord and revive his comrades. With his new power and upgraded skills, he was finally able to free the dragon Veldora from his magical prison. Leaving the cave, Veldora, now in the form of a muscular blonde man, enjoys his freedom after being imprisoned for 300 years. While he was in Rimuru's stomach, he accessed his memories and read all the manga that Rimuru ever read. He became a manga addict and calls them his sacred texts that contain all knowledge of the world. Both him and Rimuru are happy to finally see each other in person after a long time. It also turns out that Veldora gained an ultimate skill called Faust when Rimuru became a demon lord. After completing the analysis of Veldora's prison, Rimuru also gained 2 additional ultimate skills called Veldora and Uriel. Before they depart toward Rimuru City, Rimuru tells Veldora to suppress his enormously powerful aura so he doesn't scare anyone. As soon as the 2 of them arrive in Rimuru City, Rimuru introduces Veldora to everyone. The Dryad trainee immediately recognizes the dragon. She is especially happy to see him since he was the one holding her and her sisters stay in the forest of Jura after they were separated from the Queen of Spirits. When the others realize the strange man really is the powerful dragon who used to be the guardian of the forest until he disappeared, they all kneel before him. Veldora tells everyone that Rimuru is his best friend, and the embarrassed Rimuru explains how he met and befriended him. Celebrating the defeat of Falmouth's army and their comrades' revival, Rimuru and the townspeople eat, drink, and party together. The next day, Rimuru makes his new demon servant Diablo his second secretary and tells Cheyenne to teach him how to do his job. He also promotes the lizardman Gabru into the one in charge of research and development in Tempest. Talking to Yumu and the 3 Beansketeers of Eurazania, Rimuru reveals to them that he has become a demon lord. He wants to announce it to the world soon and then pick a fight with the demon lord Clayman, who is behind all of Tempest's recent troubles and tragedies. Rimuru's priorities are now reforming the Kingdom of Falmouth, keeping the Western Holy Church in check, and rescuing the demon lord Carrion, who disappeared when the demon lord Milim attacked his kingdom of Eurazania. In order to start working on some of these problems, Rimuru appoints Rhaegar as the person who will negotiate with the Western nations, orders Benamuru to prepare an army to fight Clayman, and tells Cheyenne, Yumu, and Myron to interrogate the King of Falmouth and the Archbishop of the Western Holy Church, who are their prisoners of war. Suddenly, the Guildmaster Fuse barges into the meeting room. He is representing the Kingdom of Blumen and has arrived with 50 soldiers to help Rimuru fight against Falmouth. When Rimuru tells him the war has already ended and he has destroyed the enemy army all by himself, Fuse is speechless. At that moment, the Dwarven King Gazel arrives together with a group of knights, telling Rimuru he wants to meet him. From the forest, a group of mysterious hooded people appear, and Rimuru is surprised he didn't notice them. The group turns out to be from the sorcerer's dynasty of Thalion, and it's led by a man called Errol. When Rimuru introduces himself, Errol suddenly flies into a rage and immediately accuses him of seducing his daughter. He starts preparing a high-level explosion spell, but before he can finish it, Aaron runs at him and hits him with her staff, interrupting him. It turns out Errol is Aaron's overprotective father and an Archduke of Thalion. He received a report claiming that Rimuru kidnapped his daughter, but Aaron tells him it's not true. Politely introducing himself to Rimuru, Errol tells him the second reason he came is to meet him in persona as a representative of the Emperor of Thalion. In the Holy Empire of Lubelius, the Harlequin Laplace tries sneaking into the Western Holy Church's inner sanctum, but is immediately attacked by a vampire priest. Having barely survived and escaped, Laplace reports to a mysterious man. The mysterious man turns out to be Yuki, the Grandmaster of the Free Guild, and he is scheming something that involves Rimuru. As a reward for Laplace's efforts, Yuka promised him to revive the demon lord Kazalem, who used to be the president of the moderate Harlequin Alliance before he went missing 200 years ago. Leon Cromwell had something to do with his disappearance. Yuki reveals that he transferred Kazalem's soul into an artificial body that looks like a beautiful blonde elf, and Laplace bursts out laughing when he sees him. However, Kazalem still hasn't fully revived yet. Having infiltrated the Western Holy Church and found nothing suspicious, Laplace tried sneaking into the inner sanctum, where only the Emperor of Lubelius can enter. When he mentions that a vampire priest drove him away with a red beam, Kazalem recognizes the priest as a powerful demon lord called Valentine, who he fought with in the past. Yuki thinks that Valentine was there because the Emperor could also be a demon lord himself, and Laplace suggests he uses Milam, Clayman, and Free to lure Valentine out. Back in Tempest, Rimuru begins the meeting with the representatives from Tempest, Blumend, Dworgen, Thalion, and Eurazania. First, he introduces Veldora to everyone, and Gazel, Errol, and Fuse are shocked to find out the dragon returned. Fuse passes out from the shock, while Gazel and Errol demand to talk to Rimuru in private. In Rimuru's office, Gazel and Errol demand an explanation for Veldora's return. After Rimuru tells them the whole story of his relationship with Veldora, the two are still surprised, but accept it. However, they think that the Western Holy Church could become a problem when they find out, since they hate all dragons and especially Veldora. Because they don't want to pick a fight with a dragon, and Demon Lord, Errol, and Gazel tell Rimuru they will take his side if the church becomes his enemy. Having ended their discussion, Rimuru, Gazel, and Errol return to the others, and the great meeting continues. Rimuru explains to everyone that he is actually a human reincarnated as a slime, and tells them about his relationship to Veldora. He also tells them about his fight with the Holy Knight Hinata, and the fact that she thinks he's dead right now. Rimuru got the impression that Hinata was unreasonable, but Fuse, Gazel, and Errol all heard that she is noble, rational, and helpful to anyone who needs her help. Nevertheless, Rimuru doesn't particularly want to pick a fight with the church. Remembering that Hinata hates him because he killed Shizu, he thinks that someone probably told her lies about him, since not many people know he has absorbed Shizu. Thinking about it some more, Rimuru realizes that one of the rare people who know that is Yuki, the Grandmaster of the Free Guild, but he doesn't know why he would work against him. Suddenly, Ramirez crashes the meeting and starts yelling that Tempest is doomed. Ramirez tells the others that she is one of the 10 great demon lords, but nobody is surprised since Veldora's return shocked everyone so much. Ramirez doesn't believe Veldora is back and starts bragging about being stronger than him, but while she's gloating, Rimuru takes her to Veldora and she faints when she sees him. Ignoring Ramirez's dramatics, Rimuru continues the meeting. He tells everyone he is going to announce to the world that he has become a demon lord, but he won't publicly reveal how he awakened. He will tell everyone that Fulmuth's soldiers died in battle, and that the bloodshed caused Veldora's seal to break and release him. He will say that he and Yumu then made a big sacrifice to Veldora and convinced him to become the forest's guardian again. The others agree with Rimuru's decision, and Veldora doesn't mind if he lies about him. After settling that issue, Rimuru focuses on the problem of the kingdom of Falmouth. He wants to start a civil war in Falmouth so it can be destroyed and reborn as a new nation with Yumu as its leader. When Gazel asserts himself and asks Yumu if he's prepared to suffer for the good of his people, Yumu tells him he doesn't care about that since he didn't want to become a king in the first place. However, since Rimuru entrusted him that role, he is prepared to do his best to fulfill it, and he also wants to impress Myron, the woman he loves. Grucius and Myron support him, and Gazel is satisfied with his answer. Both Gazel and Fuse offer their help to make Yumu the king. Speaking up for the first time in a while, Errol asks Fuse if he truly trusts Rimuru, even though he's a monster. He says that he would talk to the church, who usually deals with monsters, before he risks trusting one of them. When Fuse simply tells him that he trusts Tempest more than he trusts the church, Errol apologizes for doubting him. Before he decides if he wants to support Rimuru or not, Errol asks Rimuru what he intends to do with his new Demon Lord power. Rimuru simply answers that he wants to create a world where everyone can live comfortably. Surprised, Errol starts laughing and apologizes for doubting him. He immediately asks him to open diplomatic relations between Thalion and the Jura Tempest Federation. Rimuru gladly accepts and everyone claps, ending the long meeting. In his mansion, Clayman tells Laplace he wants to invade Eurazania. After Milan wiped out its leader Carrion in the capital city, Clayman wants to sacrifice the people remaining there in order to awaken as a true demon lord. Before, Rimuru made Clayman think he killed his subordinate Myron, and now he concludes that Carrion made him kill her. Clayman makes that his excuse to attack Rimuru and Carrion's nations. Laplace asks him if he came up with that plan alone, but Clayman immediately tells him that he is acting alone and that no one except Kazalim and one other person can give him orders. Laplace warns him that he shouldn't underestimate Melim, since she is one of the ancient demon lords. After Laplace leaves, Clayman loses his composure and angry because Laplace suggested he is being controlled by someone. Back in Tempest, Rimuru notices Ramirez arrived together with a golem he made for her when he visited her labyrinth. The golem called Beretta is polite and she congratulates him on becoming a demon lord. Approaching Ramirez, Rimuru asks her why she thinks Tempest is doomed, but Ramirez is absorbed in reading manga books with Veldora and ignores him. When Rimuru threatens to spoil the manga for her, Ramirez starts listening to him. She tells him that Clayman proposed Walpurgis, which is a banquet where demon lords discuss important issues. The gathering will be held in 3 days. Since Walpurgis must be approved by 3 demon lords, Clayman, Melim, and Free approve at that time. Ramirez thinks Tempest is in danger because the topic of the gathering is Tempest becoming a powerful nation and Rimuru claiming to be a demon lord. Clayman claims that Carrion broke the demon lord's non-aggression pact and informed Rimuru that Myron is working for Clayman, which is why Rimuru killed her. She reveals that Clayman already used this as an excuse to invade Urizania. Revealing that Myron is alive, Rimuru tells her that Clayman is making everything up. Hearing this, Ramirez tells him she doesn't know what the other demon lords think, but that she wants to take Rimuru's side. After all that, everyone decides to take a break enjoying Rimuru's hot springs and then eat dinner together. Since they haven't seen Ramirez in a long time, Trainee and her sister Traya pamper her and Ramirez enjoys their attention very much. Having interrogated Falmouth's king and the Archbishop of the Western Church, Cheyenne, Yumu, and Myron found out that a mysterious traveling merchant told the king that Tempest might endanger their trade routes. Listening to the merchant, the king started thinking about attacking Tempest. They also found out that the Western Holy Church's ringleader was Cardinal Nicholas Spurtus, whose plan was subjugating Tempest as a nation hostile to their god. Hearing this, Fuse, Gazel, and Errol decide to officially announce their diplomatic and trade relations with Tempest, so they can see how the church will react. Rimuru orders Yumi to take the prisoners back to Falmouth and make himself out to be a hero who rescued them. He also tells him to take Diablo with him as protection. Rimuru then focuses in their upcoming war against Clayman. So he tells him he saw Clayman's army preparing for war within Milim's domain. The army consists of 30,000 soldiers and it's led by a man called Yamza. Hearing his name, Myron recognizes him as a cruel man who uses a sword infused with ice magic. Just like Yamza is now, Myron used to be a part of the Five Fingers, who are Clayman's strongest subordinates. Since Clayman would know that such an army wouldn't be enough to defeat Tempest, Rimuru realizes that his target could actually be the kingdom of Urizania. Raffles' voice then tells him it's possible if that Clayman wants to kill all the remaining people of Urizania and awaken as a true demon lord. So he thinks that Clayman's army will probably reach Urizania in 2 days. While everyone is thinking of ways to get to Urizania in time, Raffles' voice tells Rimuru she developed a skill called Perfect Transport that can safely transport his army anywhere. Having found a way to get his army to Urizania, Rimuru tells his forces that they are going to go into battle the next day. Talking to Ramirez, Rimuru finds out he can also attend Walpurgis, so he intends to surprise Clayman and get some answers from him. Since he can take 2 subordinates with him, he decides to take Cheyenne and Ranga. Beldora wants to go too, but Rimuru tells him protecting the city is more important and convinces him to stay. He wants to make Clayman put his guard down, so he doesn't want him to know he's allied with Veldora. He reveals that he can summon Veldora whenever he wants, so even if something happens, he can rely on him. Rimuru expects Leon Cromwell to be at Walpurgis, but he decides to focus on Clayman. In Demon Lord Milim's domain, in a place called the City of the Forgotten Dragon, 2 priests are talking. They are dissatisfied because they have to house and feed Clayman's entire army. The bald priest called Midre and the gray-haired priest called Herms are members of the Dragon Faithful, a religion that worships Milim. They think that Clayman made Milim write the order to destroy Urizania, but they can't do anything about it. When Yamza from Clayman's Five Fingers arrives, the priests act politely towards him like nothing is going on. Talking to him, Midre mentions that they won't be able to give the army more food without their own people ending up hungry, and Yamza gets furious in an instant. Seeing his reaction, Midre tells him that his people will do anything to help. Yamza tells him they can transport the army's supplies for them, and Herms interrupts them, saying that's unreasonable. Before he manages to finish the sentence, Yemza cuts off his arm, leaving him writhing in pain. Midre kicks Herms into a wall and asks Yemza to forgive him. When Yemza leaves, Midre heals Herms' arm and tells him he shouldn't talk back to Yemza, even though he's furious at him too. In his mansion, Rimuru thinks of a way to evacuate all the civilians from Eurozania, and Raffles' voice gives him the idea to transport them with the perfect transport skill. Clayman enters the room and we find out Frey is working with him. The necklace he gave Milim contains forbidden magic that enables him to control Milim. Satisfied, Clayman starts laughing and beating Milim's unresisting body. Frey is helping him because of a promise she made to him and because she doesn't like Milim. In the present, Frey is looking forward to Walpurgis and the fact that it will cause Clayman's downfall. Arriving at an ice-covered castle, the demon lord Leon Cromwell visits another demon lord, a red-haired demon called Guy Crimson. He is one of the oldest and strongest demon lords, just like Milim. Taking Leon to his terrace, Guy tells him he should come to the next Walpurgis. He suspects that Clayman, who he considers a weakling, has done something to Milim and also thinks Carrion's presumed death is suspicious. When Leon mentions that he heard Veldora came back, a white-haired woman appears from a portal. It turns out she is one of the 4 true dragons, the white ice dragon Velzard. She is interested in Veldora since he is her younger brother and she hasn't felt his presence for 2 years. Leon has a theory that Rimuru pulled Veldora together with his seal into a hyperspace he created. Using her connection to Veldora, Velzard senses that his presence is faint and thinks he is weakened. However, we know that Rimuru actually just ordered Veldora to reduce his aura. We find out Leon is trying to summon a specific person, but hasn't had any luck yet. Curious about Rimuru, both Leon and Guy want to see him for themselves, and they look forward to Walpurgis. The day of Walpurgis in the forest of Jura, Rimuru creates a crystal orb and has Trini transfer her soul inside of it. He places the orb inside a wooden doll he made out of the tree that is Trini's original body, since she's a dryad. Doing this, he enabled Trini to manifest physically and evolve into a Dryas doll dryad. Now Trini can move freely and follow Ramirez to Walpurgis. Later, Benamura reports to Rimuru, telling him about his idea. His soldiers will disguise themselves as refugees and lead the enemy into Geld's trap. Benamura reveals that he gained a skill called Born Leader when Rimuru awakened. That skill enables him to easily read his enemy's every move, which is why he's confident his army will win. He even wants to invade and destroy Clayman's castle after they win the war. Hearing this, Shuna wants to go with them so she can protect them from Clayman's magic, and Rimuru lets her go once the other ogres convince him that they will protect her. In Eurozania, Clayman's army marches towards Geld's trap while Benamaru and the Beastketeers observe them. When the time comes, Geld activates his trap, which is a massive pitfall into which Clayman's soldiers fall into. Some of the soldiers manage to fly into the air, but they're quickly taken care of by Gabaru and his flying lizardmen. Meanwhile, the enemies who are trying to climb out of the pit are attacked by the goblins, Geld's orcs, and Soi's ninjas. After the war is as good as won, Benamura gives the 3 Beastketeers permission to go fight the enemy leaders. On a cliff in the distance, Midre and Herms realizes that Clayman's army lost. Midre is furious because they turned out to be so weak. When Sufia and the lizardmen arrive, the 2 priests prepare to fight them. Somewhere else, Phobio is running through a forest until he sees Tyr and Footman Harlequin, who tricked him to revive Charybdis in the past. When they continue to make fun of him, he runs at them angrily and slashes at them with his claws. When they dodge his attacks, Geld appears behind them and attacks them too. In Clayman's army's headquarters, Yemza realizes Clayman's army is defeated. He doesn't want to return to Clayman, knowing he's going to kill him or turn him into a puppet when he hears about his defeat. Telling the others he's going to look for reinforcements, he runs away, intending to find another demon lord to work with. However, when he tries using a transportation skill to escape, it won't activate. It turns out Albus appeared, defeated everyone around the tent, and disabled his magic. Having no other choice, Yemza decides to fight her and prepares his sword. They seem to be equals, but suddenly a group of Yemza's soldiers attack Albus from behind. She manages to turn them into stone with her powers, but then Yemza attacks her while she's distracted. Surprisingly, Gabta appears and blocks Yemza's sword. Furious, Yemza attacks Gabta with an ice bolt, but Gabta nullifies it with his own projectile. However, Gabta thinks he is no match for Yemza's swordsmanship skills and leaves him for Albus to fight. At the same time, Herms faces off against Gabaru while Sufia fights Midre. Midre turns out to be a lot stronger than Sufia, while Gabaru dominates Herms, who is being forced to dodge his quick spear attacks. Midre reveals that he is actually as powerful as Milim, if not more. When Sufia realizes Midre is one of the dragon faithful and not Clayman's forces, she starts respecting him. When Gabiru defeats Hermes, Midre has a surprisingly pleasant conversation with him and Sufia. Midre reveals that the Dragon Faithful are actually evolved lizardmen, just like Gabiru. However, they were born of the union between a dragon and a human. Only a few of them are able to transform into a dragon, but they all inherited the dragon's strength. After telling them that, Midre challenges both Gabiru and Sufia to fight him at the same time. Meanwhile, Nyamza and Albus continue their fight too. Nyamza acknowledges Albus as an equal, but he still has one more trick up his sleeve. Using an artifact he is wearing on his leg, he summons a double of himself, but Albus isn't impressed in the least. Getting angry, the two Yamzas run at Albus, but Albus creates a lightning storm and transforms herself, looking more powerful than ever. She instantly defeats all of Yamza's subordinates and destroys the artifact that summons Yamza's double just by looking at it. She then electrocutes and paralyzes Yamza with a lightning bolt, forcing him to surrender. Suddenly, having heard he declared he gives up, Clayman forces Yamza to swallow a dark orb. Having swallowed the orb, Yamza swells into a blue monstrosity that looks exactly like Charybdis. Approaching Midre, Benimaru is ready to fight him, but Sufia and Gabiru stop him. They tell them the priests are Milim's subordinates and that they even healed them, convincing Benimaru they aren't as bad as Clayman's army. Even though both Benimaru and Midre are curious to see how strong the other is, they don't want to ruin Rimuru's relationship with Milim. They acknowledge each other's strength and become friends. In the forest, Tyr and Footman realize Clayman's plans failed, so they simply decide to leave. Phobio doesn't want to let them go, but Tyr knocks him out in just a few hits. Footman then attacks Geld and finishes him off with a huge ball of energy. Before they disappear, the Harlequins tell the two of them that they're going to leave them alive, but that they could kill them if they wanted to. Phobio and Geld realize they could have died, so they're happy they have survived. They swear they will defeat the Harlequins next time. With the war won, Benimaru orders his soldiers to heal Clayman's soldiers and takes them all as prisoners. In Tempest, Rimuru sends Shuna to Eurazania and then continues preparing for Walpurgis. He asks about the 4 remaining ancient demon lords he doesn't know about, and Veldora tells him he fought one of them thousands of years ago, a female vampire demon lord. Back then, he burned her city down and she got angry at him. Ramirez says that the vampire who is ruling that nation right now is called Roy Valentine. Veldora also remembers a demon lord called Dogrol, who is a giant, as well as a demon lord called Guy Crimson. Ramirez chimes in and says that there's also a lazy demon lord called Yino. The time comes for Rimuru and the others to leave for Walpurgis, and a demonic-looking gate appears in the middle of the room. A green-haired maid called Mazeri appears, saying she came to pick up Ramirez and Rimuru. Ramirez, with Trainee and Beretta, who she chose as attendants, passes through the gate, and Rimuru, Cheyenne, and Ranga follow her. Meanwhile, Zoe, Shuna, and Hakaru are wading through fog and searching for Clayman's castle. Suddenly, they are surrounded by a huge number of skeletons. Among them is Adalman, a powerful skeleton, who is one of Clayman's 5 fingers. Hakaru runs at him, but one of his skeleton soldiers blocks his sword. When Zoe tries attacking Adalman, a powerful undead dragon stops him. Even when Zoe cuts it to pieces, the dragon quickly puts himself together. Zoe realizes he will have to destroy his soul to defeat him, and Shuna tells him she sees the dragon's soul inside Adalman. Shuna decides to fight Adalman while Zoe is fighting the dragon, and Hakaru is busy with the skeleton swordsman. She calmly approaches Adalman and creates a magic field that disintegrates all the skeletons around them, while not letting any new ones to enter. She realizes that someone bound Adalman's soul to the land. Adalman bombards her with acid and curses, but Shuna finds a counter for every one of his spells. The skeleton is impressed that Shuna can use holy magic, even though she is a monster, but Shuna tells him that anyone can use it as long as they believe in miracles. Hearing this, Adalman remembers he was once an important priest, but lost his faith in the god Luminous when he was betrayed by the other priests. He thought he could never use holy magic again, but Shuna made him realize he is wrong. Praying sincerely for his wish to be granted, Adalman starts casting holy magic, grateful to Shuna for opening his eyes. However, the demon lord Kazalim bound his soul to the land and cursed him to be unable to destroy himself, so he wants to target Shuna, and with a disintegration spell, and hopefully be disintegrated together with her. When he casts the spell, Shuna overwrites it with her own and announces that she will free him. She creates a huge explosion of light that eradicates all of Adalman's minions. After the battle, Zoe and Hakaru thank her for saving them, and the 3 of them prepare to invade Clayman's castle. Suddenly, Adalman stops them and, summoning his skeletal minions, kneels in front of them. He wholeheartedly thanks Shuna for freeing him and the other skeletons from their curse. Since he lost all faith in his god, he wants to meet the person Shuna has so much faith in and become his servant too. Thinking he'll quit when he finds out Rimuru is a slime, she tells him she will introduce them. Finding out that Shuna is looking for Clayman's castle, Adalman offers to lead her there. Meanwhile, Rimuru arrives at the Walpurgis banquet. He sees the demon lords Guy, Dagrel, and Valentine arrive and feels that they're all incredibly powerful. Surprisingly, he notices Valentine's attendant is even more powerful than Valentine himself. Free, the harpy demon appears, and Cheyenne tells Rimuru that her attendant, a lion man with wings, reminds her of Carrion. At that moment, Leon Cromwell appears and approaches Rimuru. Leon says his appearance is familiar, and Rimuru tells him Shizu is dead already. Leon knew that, and he thinks she died because she never accepted Ifrit, the spirit he put in her body. He claims he gave Shizu the opportunity to choose her own way of life, and she chose to continue living as a human, so he doesn't think he did anything wrong. However, he is interested in Rimuru and invites him to his castle, mysteriously telling him he is welcome there if he makes it out of Walpurgis alive. At that moment, Milim arrives together with Clayman, who is carrying a small fox-like creature. Sitting down, Clayman thanks everyone for coming and starts explaining the reason he proposed the meeting. He starts his story by claiming that the demon lord Carrion tempted Rimuru to declare himself as a demon lord, proving this with the fact that Carrion's forces are currently in Tempest. Afterwards, Carrion instigated the kingdom of Falmouth to invade Tempest and then offered Rimuru to cooperate with him to fight them off. After defeating Falmouth, Rimuru declared himself a demon lord and Carrion gave him his backing. Clayman accuses Rimuru of violating the non-aggression pact between the demon lords. He claims that Rimuru killed his subordinate Myron because she revealed all that information to him, and that he also conspired with Carrion to kill Clayman too. After Milim learned about Carrion's betrayal, she was so angry she destroyed Eurazania and killed him. Because of all this, he wants Rimuru to be purged. After Clayman finishes his story, Rimuru stands up and accuses him of being a liar. He reveals that Myron is alive and in his care. He then shows everyone footage of Clayman's forces attacking Eurazania, Yamza, into Charybdis, and the Harlequins talking about Clayman as the man they're working for. Clayman accuses Rimuru of creating fake footage. He claims that Rimuru is a weak slime who is always bluffing, saying that he could defeat Falmouth's army if Veldora's seal didn't break coincidentally. Hearing this, the giant Dagrol realizes Clayman's stories are contradictory because Rimuru wouldn't have to rely on Carrion's power to defeat Falmouth if he had Veldora's power. Clayman ignores him and keeps badmouthing Rimuru, claiming he is tarnishing the reputation of the demon lords. However, when he ends his speech, nobody supports him since he doesn't have any actual proof. Rimuru says he has proof of Clayman's misdeeds, since Phobio can testify that Clayman's Harlequin allies fooled him into reviving Charybdis in the past. To intimidate Clayman, Rimuru makes the table they're sitting at disappear, and Clayman wants him to be punished for using violence against other demon lords. Rimuru reveals that Clayman tried controlling his mind while he was speaking just then, which is also forbidden between demon lords. Rimuru tells him that, if he just doesn't like him, Clayman should simply fight him one-on-one instead of calling a Walpurgis. He doesn't care about being a demon lord, he just wants to build a nation where he can enjoy his life, and anyone whom interferes with his goal is his enemy. Guy then speaks up, agreeing that the two of them should just fight to settle their issues. If Rimuru manages to defeat Clayman, the others will acknowledge him as a demon lord and everything will be settled. Confident he can win in a fight, Clayman tells Milim to get up. Guy says that Milim can fight with him, as long as it's her decision. Becoming nervous, Rimuru realizes he couldn't beat Milim, but he is still determined to save her. Rimuru tells Clayman that one of his subordinates is enough to defeat him, and Clayman gets angry, but Cheyenne suddenly beats him up with a barrage of punches. Clayman is furious and gets up, regenerating quickly. He gives a signal, and the small fox he came in with turns into a large fox monster who Raffle recognizes as Ninehead, one of Clayman's 5 fingers. Clayman also summons a metal golem from his shadow, while Ninehead summons 2 additional beasts. Growling at Ninehead, Ranga also summons 2 wolves. Guy then casts a barrier around the fighters, and Rimuru feels like he's outnumbered. Milim suddenly attacks Rimuru, and he just barely dodges her punch. While he is dodging her powerful blows, he tells Raphael to start analyzing the spell controlling her mind. At the same time, Ranga is fighting Ninehead, and Cheyenne is fighting Clayman with his golem called Viola. Outside, Ramirez wants to send Beretta to help Rimuru, but Guy doesn't let her since she technically isn't Rimuru's subordinate. Beretta says that Shai's actually loyal to 2 masters, Rimuru who created her and Ramirez who she was created for. However, if Ramirez orders Beretta to protect Rimuru, Beretta's allegiance would switch completely to Rimuru for the time. Hearing this, Guy allows Beretta to help him. We find out Guy is also the primordial demon of the color red called Rouge, but he doesn't like to be called that. Inside the barrier, while Rimuru continues desperately dodging Milim's attacks, Shine is having trouble fighting the powerful Viola. Suddenly, Beretta arrives and Rimuru orders her to help Shin. When Raffle finally finishes analyzing Milim, she says she can't find the spell Milim is affected by and suggests trying to absorb Milim's magic energy using Beelzebub. Rimuru starts absorbing Milim's energy little by little, wanting to eventually absorb Clayman's spell in the process. However, Milim surprises him and aims her strongest punch at him. At that moment, Veldora somehow appears between the two and Milim ends up hitting him instead. It turns out Veldora arrived because he wants to ask Rimuru to give him the newest volume of the manga he was reading. Rimuru is dumbfounded but tells him he will give him the volume if he keeps Milim busy fighting her. We find out that Milim is Veldora's brother's daughter. While Veldora is fighting Milim, Rimuru joins Ranga. Ninehead, who the wolf was fighting, has stopped moving and is now begging someone to help her since she's being controlled by Clayman. Dispelling Clayman's mind control, Rimuru tells Ranga to protect the fox. Looking for Beretta, Rimuru finds her having completely disassembled Viola, Clayman's golem. Meanwhile, Veldora attacks Milim with attacks he saw in manga, such as Street Fighter moves and Kamehameha blasts. Cheyenne continues fighting Clayman, but he is no match for her without Viola. He summons familiars to attack her, but she defeats him easily. Not even marionette threads that can control demon lords work on her. Ripping his shirt off in rage, Clayman turns into Crazy Pierre Clayman, putting on a mask and growing 6 arms. Until now, he intentionally fought elegantly, but now he uses powerful weapons in each of his arms. However, even that isn't enough to defeat Cheyenne, and she breaks all his weapons and knocks him onto the ground. Clayman can't get up anymore, and he doesn't believe he has been defeated. He begs Frey to help her, but she half-heartedly tells him she can't interfere. When Clayman orders Milim to kill everyone, she reveals that she was only pretending to be controlled the whole time, surprising everyone except Frey. In his rage, Clayman reveals that someone else gave him the mind-controlling stone he put into Milim's necklace. At that moment, Carrion reveals that he was the Lion Man who arrived with Frey, and Rimuru is shocked he was in such an obvious disguise. It turns out Frey was never on Clayman's side, and she lied to him about Carrion being dead. When Clayman starts yelling and threatens to kill everyone, Cheyenne cuts off all his limbs and leaves him on death's door. Guy lifts the barrier and Frey thanks Milim for helping her. Carrion gets angry because Milim almost killed him and destroyed his kingdom of her own will, but Milim tells him it's all Clayman's fault. Rimuru calms Carrion down by telling him he will help him rebuild his nation using Clayman's men and money from his treasury. While he is dying, Clayman regrets not listening to Laplace warning him about Milim. Laplace was his closest friend and he helped him become a demon lord. We find out Clayman is part of the modern Harlequin alliance and he wanted the other Harlequins to acknowledge him. One day, he met Yuki who told him he wants to make the world his. In order to achieve that, he wants the help of the modern Harlequin alliance. In exchange for them helping him, he offered to resurrect Kazalim, the demon lord who created Clayman and the other Harlequins in the first place. In the present, Clayman decides he can't die before he accomplishes something. Screaming about wanting overwhelming power, he hears the voice of Raphael telling him that his wish has been heard. Clayman's body starts rebuilding itself in a purple vortex of souls, and he becomes more powerful than ever. It turns out this was part of Rimuru and Raphael's plan. In order to free the souls of the people Clayman has killed, they needed Clayman to awaken as a true demon lord. Now, Rimuru intends to defeat him and prove himself to the other demon lords. Rimuru realizes that Clayman intends to distract him and escapes, so he puts up a barrier. Having no choice, Clayman charges up his magic energy and hits Rimuru with his ultimate technique called Demon Blaster. However, Rimuru manages to restrain and absorb the energy using his Beelzebub skill. He tells Clayman he will give him a painless death if he tells him everything he knows about the man he is working for. Clayman starts gloating about being a demon whose soul can come back to life if Rimuru kills him, but Rimuru just starts punching him repeatedly. Once he stops, he asks Clayman to talk again, but Clayman tells him he would never betray a friend. Rimuru tells him that he can kill him even though he is a deathman, and Clayman gets terrified. Realizing he won't find out anything from him, Rimuru announces that he is going to execute Clayman and none of the demon lords are against it. Putting his hand on Clayman's forehead, Rimuru tells him the moment before his soul dies will feel like an eternity to him and that he should take that time to think about what he has done. Desperately crawling on the floor, Clayman starts calling for the Harlequins and Kazalim to help him. Rimuru uses Beelzebub on him and absorbs him. After the battle is over, Guy tells Rimuru he acknowledges him as a demon lord. When Valentine says that he can't accept a lowly slime as a demon lord, he gets in an argument with Veldora. Trying to break up the fight, Milim accidentally reveals that the real Demon Lord Valentine is actually the maid that came with the blonde man they thought was the Demon Lord. Valentine is furious, and having no other choice, reveals her true form. Her real name is Luminous Valentine, while the man's name is Roy Valentine. Because she saw Clayman recognize Roy when he came into the room before, Luminous thinks he has something to do with an intruder that snuck into her domain. She sends Roy there and tells him to strengthen the guard. Neven heard Clayman mentioning Kazalim and remembers killing him in the past, after which he took his status of Demon Lord. Carrion explains to Rimuru that Kazalim is the Cursed Lord and that he, together with Melim, actually recommended Carrion as a Demon Lord. It also turns out that Kazalim is a Deafman, just like Clayman. Rimuru thinks Kazalim could have pretended he was killed by Leon and then went to hide somewhere. Guy thinks Thought a Human could have helped Kazalim come back. Rimuru is worried Kazalim is going to come after him, but Milim tells him he is much stronger than Kazalim now. Suddenly, Free speaks up and decides to relinquish her status as Demon Lord. After she saw Rimuru and Clayman's fight, she realized she is too weak to be a Demon Lord, and now she wants to become Milim's subordinate. Carrion also says he wants to become her subordinate since she beat him fair and square. Milim is nervous, but in the end she accepts them, not knowing what else to do. Guy officially announces that Free and Carrion are no longer Demon Lords, so now there's only 8 great Demon Lords left. Since the group needs a new name, Guy insists that Rimuru makes one up for them since he has been newly acknowledged as a Demon Lord and it's his fault that they lost 2 members. Thinking about a new name, Rimuru looks at the stars and comes up with the name Octagram, meaning the 8-star Demon Lords. Hearing their new name, the Demon Lords accept it, some more enthusiastically than others. While everyone's still at Walpurgis, Laplace tries sneaking into the inner sanctum of the Western Holy Church again, thinking Valentine won't be there this time. However, he comes across Hinata, the Holy Knight Captain, and runs away, knowing he can't beat her. While he's running away, Roy Valentine teleports in front of him. Smugly, he tells Laplace that Clayman was killed like an insect. Getting angry, Laplace unleashes a barrage of kicks and punches on Valentine, furious that he is insulting his friend. Getting up, Valentine tries attacking him, but Laplace reveals that he took out his core. Squishing Valentine's core in his hand, Laplace kills him. With the battle over, Laplace starts both laughing and crying over his friend. With Clayman defeated, peace returns to the land. Frey and Carrion become Milim's subordinates. Yumu and Diablo arrive at Falmouth, and Rimuru returns to Tempest, where his friends welcome him happily. Recalling how boring his human life was, Rimuru is grateful that he got another chance to have a meaningful life full of excitement.
Last time, the Kingdom of Falmouth joined the Western Holy Church to attack Rimuru's nation, Tempest. In order to defeat them, Rimuru became a demon lord and then summoned a powerful primordial demon who he decided to call Diablo. After the war, King Gazel of Dworgen, Marquis Arald of Thalion, and Fuse of the Kingdom of Blumen met Rimuru to discuss the future of Tempest. Fortunately, they all agreed to peacefully coexist, so that there are no secrets between them. Rimuru decided to tell them all about himself, including how he was reincarnated as a slime and how he met Veldora the dragon. And Ramiris, a small demon lord who looks like a fairy, showed up in a panic. She told Rimuru that the demon lords Clayman, Frey, and Milim approved Walpurgis, a banquet where demon lords discuss important issues. The spiteful Clayman hates Rimuru, so he wants him to be punished for declaring himself a demon lord out of nowhere. Some time before, Milim attacked the kingdom of Euryzania, believing that its ruler, the demon lord Carrion, was a threat to Rimuru. After that, Clayman used that situation to send his army and attack the weakened Euryzania to become a true demon lord. In order to help Euryzania, Rimuru sent some of his most trusted allies there. At Walpurgis, Clayman tried convincing the demon lords that Rimuru conspired with Carrion to attack Falmouth and then declared himself a demon lord. However, at that point Rimuru's people defeated Clayman's army in Euryzania, and he could prove to everyone that Clayman is a liar and a villain. Since Clayman wouldn't admit any of that, the powerful demon lord Guy Crimson suggested that Rimuru should defeat Clayman in order to prove his worth as a demon lord. Rimuru agrees and the two start their fight. Clayman sends Milim, who he believed he was controlling, to attack Rimuru and the bodyguards he chose to come to the Walpurgis with him. After a difficult fight, Milim suddenly revealed that she was never manipulated by Clayman. She actually joined forces with Frey and Carrion and worked with them the entire time to prove Clayman's evil scheme. Going absolutely nuts, Clayman then transformed into a true demon lord. However, even in this more powerful form, Rimuru managed to defeat him and consume him using his Beelzebub ability. After all that, Frey and Carrion relinquished their statuses as demon lords and decided to serve Milim. Since there are now 8 demon lords instead of 10, Rimuru came up with the name Octagram and finally became one of them. After the whole Walpurgis situation, Rimuru enjoyed a dinner party with the other demon lords. Leon Cromwell and Luminous Valentine left. but the others had fun together eating luxurious food, taking a glass of expensive brandy. Milim admits that she really wanted to battle against Rimuru, so she didn't immediately reveal that she wasn't manipulated by Clayman. Annoyed, Rimuru takes the glass from her, telling her that it's too early for her to start drinking, even though she's actually the oldest demon lord. This brandy containing high-quality fruit from Euryzania was actually produced in Tempest, and everyone is impressed by how good it is. While he's eating the amazing dishes, Rimuru uses Raphael, his ultimate analysis skill, to deduce their recipes, enabling him to recreate them later. After Walpurgis, Rimuru finally returns to Tempest. There, all the goblins and orcs greet him, bowing to him respectfully. While he's relaxing in his mansion, Rimuru is brought some matcha pudding by a beautiful goblin girl. Rimuru finds out that Veldora sold information about what happened at Walpurgis to Diablo for a few servings of dessert. Veldora doesn't even need to eat, but he wants to. Annoyed by Veldora revealing so much to Diablo, Rimuru tells the beautiful goblin girl not to give him any dessert for a while. When the bickering ends, Diablo reports to Rimuru that he revived Falmouth's king and his subordinates after they were brutalized by Shin. In normal circumstances, their bodies would have been too damaged to be healed, but Diablo managed to restore them using advanced magic. The chief sorcerer of the kingdom of Falmouth, Raisin, was among the revived. Overwhelmed by Diablo's power, he offered to become his servant in exchange for restoring the king of Falmouth to normal. Diablo allowed him to become his servant, but under the strict condition that he can't lay a finger on Rimuru. If he does, Diablo will personally kill both him and the king of Falmouth and then make sure that all life is extinguished from the land of Falmouth itself. Having heard this, the Archbishop of the Western Holy Church, who had joined forces with Falmouth before, also offered to become Diablo's servant. Listening to all this in a half-dead state, King Admaris of Falmouth was disappointed by how things turned out but also swore to cooperate with Diablo. With a smile on his face, Diablo revealed that his unique skill Tempter ensures that nobody could ever betray him. Some time later, Admaris was shipped to Falmouth, but Diablo hadn't restored him to his original form, so he was still a mess of dismembered pieces in a box. Raisin also returned to the kingdom and lied to the nobles that Veldora, the powerful storm dragon that was presumed missing, had returned. The nobles were shocked when he told them that the dragon attacked Falmouth's army and made all its knights disappear, aside from him and the king. Then, Yamu, Diablo, and some other subordinates of Rimuru entered the room. Raisin once again lied, having told the nobles that Rimuru and his allies had saved them, even though they were the ones who had almost killed them in the first place. The Archbishop Reheim joined him and confirmed his lie. The two claimed that the armies of Tempest and Falmouth had been fighting until Veldora suddenly came and attacked everyone indiscriminately. According to Raisin and Reheim, the army of Falmouth had been almost completely decimated until Rimuru arrived and convinced Veldora to spare them, together with their king. Diablo also low-key threatened the two to praise Rimuru and the nation of Tempest in front of everyone. Having heard all this, the court nobles were scared and impressed. Yamu, who is actually from the kingdom of Falmouth himself, calmed them down, telling them that Rimuru actually wants to live in harmony with humans. Still, in order to prevent the nobles from getting cocky, he also told them that cooperation with Rimuru will come at a price, since they were the ones who had started the war in the first place. Unfortunately, one of the nobles called Carlos got completely pissed off, saying that Yamu has no right to represent Falmouth since he's just a commoner. Getting equally angry, Raisin told him to shut up and instantly froze him using magic. Taking the reins again, Raisin told the other nobles to trust Yamu, claiming that he was the one who had recommended them to be freed in the first place, having finally decided that they had no other choice. The nobles agreed to cooperate with Rimuru and listen to his demands. Then, Diablo walked up to what was left of King Admaris and poured Rimuru's strongest healing potion on him. The guards were furious at first, but then Admaris returned to normal. Diablo then read a proclamation from Rimuru. In a week, Rimuru wants the representatives from both nations to meet in Falmouth to discuss peace. Until then, the people of Falmouth will have to choose one of Rimuru's options. They can remove King Admaris from his throne and pay reparations to Tempest. They can surrender to Tempest and become its vassal state, or they can continue the war with Tempest. The nobles didn't think a week was enough to decide the fate of their nation, but Diablo shut them up, telling them that the war would continue if they didn't give their answer within a week's time. In the present, Diablo reveals to Rimuru that he demanded that Falmouth's reparations be 10,000 gold coins. Rimuru is flabbergasted, since that equals 1 trillion Japanese yen. It turns out that Diablo came up with the options he gave Falmouth all by himself. He intentionally made every option completely unreasonable aside from making the king abdicate and paying the reparations, since the amount of money for the reparations is also unreasonable. Diablo expects Falmouth's nobles to panic and put all the blame on King Admaris. Then, he expects the nobles to turn against Admaris and force him to pay the huge reparations. Since Admaris' royal guard has been exterminated during the war, he'll have to turn to Yamu's faction to support him. Since Yamu is on Rimuru's side, Admaris will have to become Tempest's ally as well. Meanwhile, Laplace breaks the news to the other clowns from the Moderate Clown Alliance that Clayman has died. Kaz-Ellen, the Alliance's president, confirms it, saying that she can't feel Clayman's soul anymore. The clowns are mourning Clayman, but Laplace starts insulting him instead, calling him cocky and weak. Not wanting to let Laplace badmouth his friend, Footman gets angry and almost starts a fight with him, but Kaz-Ellen and Yuuki, the otherworlder who's working with the clowns, stop them. Yuuki and Kaz-Ellen entrusted everything they had to Clayman. Their bases, funds, and army, but now all that is lost because of his foolishness. It turns out that Rimuru's allies defeated the clown's army while simultaneously destroying their bases, without anyone realizing it until it was too late. Acknowledging Rimuru's strength, Yuuki decides that the alliance should lay low for a while and wait for further development. The clown's goal is world conquest, but right now they decide to be patient until the right time comes. However, Yuuki still wants to do a little something to get back at Rimuru. Meanwhile, Hinata, the captain of Lubelius's Holy Knights, walks the nation's streets and admires the Holy Empire. She considers Lubelius a place where everyone is truly equal, and it's all thanks to its god, Luminous. Recently, she found out that the god she believed in for such a long time was actually the demon lord Luminous Valentine. Luminous is also the only person who managed to defeat Hinata in combat. Hinata remembers the past and decides that Shizu, her former master whom she loved, was too lenient in her ways. Hinata joined the Western Holy Church, became a Holy Knight within a year, and then became the captain of the Holy Knights in 2 years. However, as she climbed the ranks, she found out about the true nature of Lubelius and its church. In actuality, the Holy Emperor of Lubelius is a vampire named Louis, who is the older twin brother of the notorious demon lord Roy Valentine. A vampire like him had declared himself a god so that he could rule over humans, and Hinata couldn't stand for that. Hinata had fought Louis and his twin brother Roy, and after a fierce battle, the two vampire brothers were defeated. From the darkness, a silver-haired girl with differently colored eyes approached her completely casually. Using some kind of strange power, the girl effortlessly revived both Roy and Louis in an instant. Instead of attacking Hinata, she healed her too, while telling her how naive she is for believing that what she was doing was just, since there is no justice that could satisfy everyone in the world. The girl tells Hinata that she doesn't have the right to judge if her actions are good or evil. Finally, the girl tells Hinata that she'll be willing to face her in battle only if she can overcome something called the Trial of the 7 Days. Some time later, Hinata made it through the trial and challenged the girl again, who turned out to be Luminous Valentine, the demon lord who is controlling both Louis and Roy. Once again, Hinata lost and had no other choice than to surrender to Luminous. Getting closer to Luminous, Hinata found out that vampires don't actually need to kill humans to live. They can just take a little bit of blood and feed on the life energy inside of it. In fact, Luminous actually forbade vampires from taking large amounts of life energy. High-ranking vampires like her can also survive for an eternity without drinking even a drop of blood. There's also the undeniable fact that Lubelius is far more equal and fair than the rest of the Western nation. Luminous is to thank for that, so Hinata decided that she must protect her even though she's a vampire. The day after Laplace invaded the Western Holy Church's inner sanctum and killed Roy, Louis informs Hinata about what happened. Since Roy was very powerful, Hinata concludes that the intruder must have been stronger than a demon lord. Even though Hinata only cares about Luminous' safety, Louis tells her that Roy's death might cause his followers to lose faith. Now that Tempest has established itself as a force to be reckoned with, Louis predicts that the Western kingdoms are going to unite against Rimuru soon. Roy, who was considered a great threat against humanity, is now out of the picture, so there's an even higher likelihood that Rimuru and his nation are going to be considered an even bigger threat. Louis also thinks that the angels are going to react to Rimuru's presence, but it's a mystery as to who the angels are. Louis expects something called the Great Tenma War to take place soon, in which they'll be fighting against those angels. Hinata starts suspecting that Rimuru tricked her into letting him escape that time they fought, but also thinks that she's being manipulated by a mysterious information merchant she met with in the past. Because of all those uncertainties, she still isn't sure if letting Rimuru escape was a good or a bad thing. When Louis and Hinata tell Luminous about Roy's unfortunate fate, she feels sorry for him. She could have revived him if she was by his side, but she was at Walpurgis at the time. Hinata feels like it's her fault for letting Roy die, but Luminous blames herself instead. Right now, Luminous thinks that their biggest threats are Rimuru and Veldora. Hinata offers to kill Veldora, but Luminous tells her it's impossible for her. Veldora is the incarnation of natural energy, so neither swords nor magic affect him. Louis remembers the distant past when Veldora destroyed Luminous' palace, Night Rose. He also knows that Veldora is a more than formidable enemy, but Hinata still thinks she could take him on. However, Luminous forbids her to fight the dragon because she doesn't want to lose her. As for Rimuru, Luminous concludes that it's best to leave him alone. Hinata protests, saying that Tempest developing even further may potentially hasten the Angels' advance. Luminous agrees that's a possibility, but she thinks that making an enemy of Rimuru and Veldora would be even worse. The Angels might even target them instead of Luminous, since the teachings of Luminism say that monsters are humanity's common enemy. Hinata worries that Tempest's existence could make the believers lose their faith. Louis thinks they could make Rimuru their accomplice against the humans, but Luminous shoots him down. During Walpurgis, Rimuru said that he wanted to protect the humans because he needed their cooperation. In the end, the three conclude that they shouldn't interfere with Rimuru, but they could try and make him their ally. Hinata isn't completely satisfied because she holds a grudge against the slime, but she listens to Luminous. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Falmouth, King Admaris announces to the nobles that he's going to accept Rimuru's conditions and pay reparations for the war. When he tells them that Rimuru demands 10,000 gold coins, the nobles are outraged and demand that they resist Rimuru after all. They're counting on Hinata and the Western Holy Church to take care of Rimuru and Veldora. There's also a hero from the kingdom of Ingracia called Lightspeed Masayuki, and they think they could count on him too. He's considered the greatest hero in history. Turning against Admaris, the nobles demand him to pay the reparations from his pocket since they refuse to give in to the demands of monsters. Even the king's brother Edward turns against him, but Admaris remains adamant that they can't defeat Veldora no matter what they do. He wants to pay Rimuru reparations and then leave the throne. That's the only thing he can do so that the kingdom of Falmouth can continue to exist. Then, one of the nobles announces that he received a letter that morning. It says that the kingdom of Blumund is harshly judging Falmouth's dispatch of troops and that they're on Tempest's side. Blumund is a small nation, but the nobles are afraid that the nation of Dworgen, which is a vital trade partner to Falmouth, is going to take Tempest's side too. Suddenly, a knight barges into the throne room and reports that Rimuru has declared that he will become a demon lord. The nobles are nervous, but they count on the other demon lords to put Rimuru in his place. At that moment, another knight barges in and reports that Rimuru has been acknowledged by the other demon lords after having killed Clayman. Unshaken, Admaris says that Rimuru is an even greater threat than Veldora. He recommends his brother Edward as his heir to the throne. Faced with this desperate situation, the nobles are forced to agree with Admaris. However, it seems like Edward is secretly happy about this turn of events. Shortly, the kingdom of Falmouth enters into an agreement to end hostilities with Tempest and recognizes it as a legitimate nation. In Tempest, Rimuru is relaxing, completely unaware of how many people are scheming against him. Now that the war is over, his subordinates are dealing with the cleanup, such as inspecting Clayman's castle, dividing the spoils, and dealing with the war prisoners. Since Tempest is now Euryzenia's ally and Milim destroyed its capital recently, Benimaru decided to let the refugees from there live in Tempest. There wasn't enough space for everyone, so those who had villages to return to were sent back there, while the people who wanted to learn Tempest technology were taken there. The most powerful residents of Euryzenia are going to help the Orc Guild in developing the land and build a new capital city after that. Listening to Benimaru's report, Rimuru thinks how great it is to have such reliable companions. However, he's a little worried that he's not needed anymore. A few days later, Diablo returns to Tempest with a signed declaration of peace with Falmouth and the first payment toward the reparation. Just as he planned, Falmouth's nobles ended up turning against Admaris and forced all responsibility for the reparations on him. He was even forced to move to Nidal, a small domain between Falmouth and Tempest. Yamu and his forces reside there, so they'll be able to support Admaris if the nobles completely revolt against him. The Western Church is also attempting to contact Archbishop Reheim and find out more about the war between Tempest and Falmouth. Thinking it would be best if he told the church the truth, Rimuru gives Diablo a crystal ball with a message and tells him to send it to the church via Reheim. If they send Reheim with the ball, they'll be able to monitor the church's reaction. Suddenly, Gobta the Goblin arrives and announces that the war prisoners have arrived. While he's watching the prisoners passing by, Rimuru is met by Albus and Sufia, two of Euryzenia's 3 Beastketeers. They've left the third one, Phobio, in Euryzenia to watch over the prisoners who haven't left yet. Previously, Rimuru arranged temporary housing for the prisoners and he has been working out how to distribute jobs among them. Then, Gabaru the flamboyant Dragonute also returns from the war and Rimuru praises him for his efforts. Gabaru gives him a letter from Milim. Inside, Milim begs Rimuru to teach her followers how to cook for her, since the food they serve her has always been lousy. Feeling bad for Milim, Rimuru orders Gabaru to bring Milim's worshippers to Tempest so they can learn how to cook. A month after Walpurgis ended, Tempest is livelier than ever. All the refugees from the war against Falmouth have gotten used to their new lives and everyone seems happy. That day, Geld returns from Euryzenia, looking completely wiped out. In the area where Euryzenia's capital stood before the war, he did his best to organize the prisoners to work together, but all kinds of problems came up. High Orcs are usually great at working together because they can communicate telepathically. But that technique doesn't work for other races at all. Aside from that, some of the prisoners keep refusing to follow his orders, while others are motivated but aren't very productive. Because of all that, Geld gained an even greater respect for Rimuru's leadership abilities. Hearing him out, Rimuru remembers his days as a human salaryman and advises him to go out for a drink. Soon, the two find themselves in a bar where Trainee the Dryad is working the counter. Rimuru thinks of the time he was working as a salaryman and finds that it was similar to Geld's situation. There were workers who wouldn't follow orders, juniors who would try to cover up their mistakes, and superiors who would try to force the blame onto others. In the end, Rimuru and Geld stayed drinking all night. The following day there's an influx of merchants and Tempest is bustling. The Empress of Thalion, Elmesia Thalion, declared that she would establish diplomatic relations with Tempest. However, Fuse of the Kingdom of Bluemont has said that many other nations are concerned about her decision. Rimuru's subordinates are also working all over the nation. They are doing their best to build new roads, but there has been one problem. The forest of Jura, where Tempest is located, borders with the Kusha Mountains. Apparently, a race of bird people known as Tengu reside on the mountain peaks. They're known to be mild-mannered, but Sally thinks that it would be best to reach out to them before they start building any roads in that area. The Rimuru volunteers to contact them and Rimuru sends him there. The next day, Hakiru the elderly ogre brings news about the puppet nation of Distave, which was under Clayman's rule before his death. The only citizens there are the Dark Elves who maintain Clayman's castle, but they are still loyal to their former master. Apparently, an elven kingdom once existed on that land and the ruins of it can still be found there. Because of this, those Dark Elves call themselves Gravekeepers. Since the ruins of an ancient kingdom could attract treasure hunters, Rimuru tells Hakiru to keep all that a secret for now. Later, Rimuru gathers his most trusted companions for a meeting. He announces that he has officially become a demon lord and that the entire forest of Jura has been declared as his domain by the other demon lords. After he says it, everyone at the table gets nervous. The Rimuru explains that an area of the forest across the river hasn't actually been built by the Dryads, so the people there might think the emergence of a new demon lord is troubling. There are many people there and Shuna expects them to come to Rimuru for permission to continue living there. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing, since anyone would want the protection of a powerful demon lord. Thinking about this situation, Rimuru gets the idea to use it as a way to introduce Tempest to the rest of the world. He decides to personally invite the people from across the river to come visit Tempest, hoping that some of them will decide to stay there and even help out, since every day has been tense recently. He thinks that it would be a good change of pace to organize a kind of festival and relax for a bit. Setting that aside, Sally reports that there have been no big changes in the forest's ecosystem. However, he has encountered a dangerous monster called a sword grizzly, so he eliminated it. Gobta is worried about training new recruits in the forest if such high-ranked monsters are roaming there, so Rimuru decides Hakiru should train them harder for such encounters. Rimuru gets worried about dangerous monsters appearing in his forest, so Vesta, the Minister of Science, suggests they should set up an anti-magic barrier. Rimuru is surprised when he hears that Vesta and Kaijin have secretly developed such a barrier. They even have a prototype ready. Taking everyone outside, Vesta presents his prototype. It's a device that automatically gathers the magicules in the atmosphere and uses them to generate a barrier. There are also other useful features. It's able to store a large amount of magicules, preventing the creatures in the forest from evolving into dangerous monsters. The device can even be used to generate all sorts of different spells by changing out spell plates that look like records. Vesta also has a plan to use his device as effectively as possible. He wants to install his automatic magic generators along the roads to Tempest and use them to keep them safe from monsters using anti-magic barrier spells. Greatly impressed, Rimuru gives them his blessing to start mass-producing the devices as soon as possible. Casually, Veldora announces that he'll finally be able to unleash his aura and let loose once those barriers are in place, but Rimuru quickly tells him no. If Veldora stops suppressing his aura, most of the inhabitants of Tempest would die instantly and the overflow of magicules would spawn some seriously powerful monsters. Rimuru also has a powerful aura, but he's keeping it in check by using his Beelzebub skill to store the magicules he's absorbing. Still, Veldora would really love to go all out somewhere and Rimuru promises him he'll think about what he can do about it. Having heard everyone's reports, Rimuru gives Geld a blueprint. It turns out that he has been sketching a castle for Milim and her followers to live in and he wants the orc to helm its construction. Geld seems overwhelmed, but Kaijin offers to give him a hand and Rimuru motivates him, telling him he believes in him. Diablo then gives an update about the situation in Falmouth. The former King Admaris is currently teaching Yamu about manners and bargaining, since he'll need those in order to mediate between Admaris and Falmouth. As for Edward, the current king of Falmouth, Diablo thinks that he's scheming something. That's why Diablo has appointed Benimaru to start building up Tempest's army. In fact, there are so many people who want to join the army that Benimaru has trouble selecting the best troops. There's also another problem. Reheim still hasn't returned from his journey to Lubelius. Since Diablo's unique skill Tempter steals the soul of the one he's controlling after they die, Reheim must still be alive, at least. Rimuru is worried, but there's nothing he can do because going to Lubelius would be too dangerous at this point. He wants to peacefully coexist with the church, and he even sent a message to Hinata saying he's willing to forget about her attacking him in the past. Then, Shuna realizes that Hinata attacked Rimuru at the same time that Falmouth attacked Tempest, so those events have to be connected somehow. She suspects that there was someone orchestrating everything behind the scenes and that they should be wary of that person. Rimuru even thinks that Hinata didn't attack him of her free will but that she was ordered to. However, he can't imagine her listening to anyone's orders aside from her gods. That's why he thinks that someone manipulated her to attack him. Benimaru thinks that the same person must have mobilized the kingdom of Falmouth and controlled the demon lord Clayman too. Clayman wanted to get rid of Rimuru because he was in his way, so he would have hoped that Hinata would kill him. The king of Falmouth also considered Rimuru a nuisance, so he also would have welcomed Hinata killing him too. And as for Hinata, her faith doesn't allow a powerful monster such as Rimuru to exist, so she wants to kill him. Raphael, Rimuru's unique reasoning skill, thinks that there might be more than one mastermind behind all these events, because not all of the motives align. Diablo then says that he has been told that merchants gave Admaris and the others their information. Hearing this, Rimuru realizes that a merchant might be working behind the scenes in hopes of making a profit from war. He orders Diablo and Shuna to cross-reference Clayman's and Admaris business records in hope of finding one or more merchants that appear in both. He orders the others to make preparations for the upcoming festival, but also orders Benimaru to get the army ready just in case. Meanwhile, Hinata starts a meeting with the 10 great saints in the Holy Empire Lubelius. Even though she's the saints' leader, a short guy called Sar rudely insults her and blames her for letting Veldora come back and Rimuru become a demon lord. The paladins Renard, Arnaud, and Bacchus defend Hinata, but a huge guy called Grigori is on Sar's side. Hinata quickly cuts the quarrel short, offering to give her position up to Sar, but only if he can defeat her in combat. After everyone quiets down, Ritus, the paladin of water, reports that the great forest of Jura is peaceful and many merchants have been seen entering and leaving Tempest. Infiltrating the capital, she was surprised by how advanced the monster nation has become. She's even convinced that Rimuru is genuinely trying to establish friendly relations with humans. As for Veldora, she has been unable to confirm his presence in Tempest. After that, several more saints present their own reports. Then, it's Sar's turn. Since his job was investigating the kingdom of Falmouth, he reports all about King Admaris leaving the throne peacefully. However, he has also noticed that the new king, Edward, is gathering mercenaries and aggressively drafting people into his army. Because of all this, Sar suspects that there's a civil war brewing between the people supporting Edward and the people supporting Admaris. He also figured out that Edward had been in contact with the Free Union and the merchants from the east, most probably for the purpose of strengthening his own army. Hearing this, Hinata concludes that the new King Edward has no intentions of paying war reparations to Rimuru, but also understands that it's all part of Rimuru's plan. She even regrets not hearing him out when she met him in the past. Another saint called Glenda starts her report about the merchants from the east, but she was unable to find out anything important. Dissatisfied, Hinata asks Glenda to look into them once again in more detail. The saints mostly agree that Veldora hasn't actually done any damage even though he was resurrected. Hinata then tells them what she found out from an oracle of the god Luminous. The oracle told her that Rimuru is the only one who can control Veldora and that they should avoid taking action against him for that reason. The saints are shocked. Grigori gets especially angry, refusing to simply ignore Rimuru's scheme in Falmouth. He also doesn't want a demon lord going crazy on human territory. Sar agrees, thinking that the saints should be able to take Rimuru on if they work together. However, Hinata simply answers them that the oracle's words are absolute. Besides, they're not going to just leave the situation in Falmouth alone. If a civil war really breaks out, she wants to do all she can to protect the kingdom's civilians and prevent the war from spreading. Regretting her fight against Rimuru, Hinata announces that she intends to take all the responsibility for making him think the church is his enemy. She trusts Rimuru and believes that he has every intention of avoiding conflict with the humans. Hinata reveals that Rimuru is an otherworlder just like she is, and she even feels like she wronged him. Before she met him, one of the eastern merchants told her that Rimuru was a monster disguised as a human who went around deceiving his neighboring countries in hope of destroying them. The merchant also lied to her about Rimuru killing her master Shizu. Hearing about Hinata's attack on Rimuru, the saints suspect that the slime might be planning some kind of revenge against her. Hinata can't deny that as a possibility, but she intends on visiting him and talking to him, maybe even apologizing to him. The saints are worried though, afraid that she might fall into Rimuru's trap. However, Hinata believes that they could understand each other if they talked it out. At that moment, Reheim arrives. Immediately, Hinata starts asking him about Veldora, but she's interrupted by 3 figures who appear out of thin air. Reheim's attendant exclaims that they are members of the 7 Days clergy, the legendary people who train heroes. They were also the ones who assigned the trial of the 7 Days to Hinata. All the saints stand up to give the clergy members their respect, but Hinata is already familiar with them. Using her unique skill usurper, she copied all their techniques and defeated them all during the trial. Now, they're just bothersome old men to her who butt into everything she does. This time, they just came to hear what Reheim had to say about Rimuru. The Archbishop then begins his speech. He admits that he severely underestimated Rimuru during Falmouth's attack on Tempest and regrets that the war ended up helping Rimuru become a demon lord. He recounts how Rimuru attacked them with a spell they've never seen before, using mirrors to refract lasers that instantly killed a huge number of soldiers. Listening to this, Hinata concludes that Rimuru must have used scientific knowledge from his world and Falmouth's soldiers didn't know how to react to that. Then, Reheim tells them that, in a second's time, all 20,000 men in Falmouth's army died at once, leaving only him, Raisin, and the king alive. Hinata and the saints realize that such an attack could only have been pulled off by Veldora or by an awakened demon lord. They realize that Rimuru must have awakened as a true demon lord during that fight because he absorbed so many souls at once. Sar is shocked and asks how they could possibly trust such a powerful being. But some of the other saints still believe that Rimuru can be reasoned with. After all, he's a former human and he claims that he wants to coexist with the humans. Then, one of the 7 Days clergy members asks Reheim if he has anything else to tell them. The Archbishop pulls out the crystal ball with Rimuru's message to Hinata. When Hinata takes the ball, the only thing Rimuru says is that he would like to take her on in a fight one-on-one. Hinata is confused and doesn't understand why he would seek revenge against her after all this time. She wonders how one of the 7 Days clergy, a man called Ars, knew that Reheim had another message. Regretfully, Hinata announces that she has no other choice than to face Rimuru. The 7 Days clergy immediately supports her decision, even telling her that she's capable of defeating him. However, they tell her that she's not strong enough to defeat Veldora, too. Summoning a powerful weapon from a magic circle, the men announce that they're giving her a legendary sword called the Dragon Buster. Hinata then realizes that the clergy would want nothing better than for her and Veldora to kill each other. Still, she doesn't say anything and lets the clergy leave while they're wishing her luck. Soon, Hinata departs toward Tempest. She's prepared to do anything in her power to avoid conflict with Rimuru. Meanwhile, in Tempest, Rimuru is still planning the construction of the new roads and the organization of the festival. Suddenly, Sauka the Dragonute reports to him that Hinata is heading toward Tempest all by herself. Rimuru is surprised and has no idea why she would visit him. There are also 4 holy knights following her without her knowledge. Sauka also reports that Hinata is carrying a large sword, which is why it's unlikely that she came to talk. Rimuru is frustrated because his message didn't work. Then, Diablo reports that Reheim has died. It's unclear to him what happened, but he suspects that he was killed by someone. Rumors about the Archbishop being killed as part of a demon's scheme are spreading around Falmouth's surrounding nations now, and everyone is blaming Admaris for cooperating with that demon. While Hinata is on her way to Tempest, Rimuru calls an emergency meeting regarding her imminent arrival. At the same time, 30,000 temple knights from Falmouth's surrounding nations are mobilized to join King Edward of Falmouth and slay the demon they think killed the Archbishop Reheim. In actuality, the demon they're looking for is Diablo, since it's common knowledge that Diablo is backing Yamu. Both Tempest and the former King Admaris are in a bad position. Diablo blames himself for everything going wrong and regrets sending such an important figure as Reheim as a messenger. Shin immediately starts saying that she should have been in charge of the operation and looking down on him. But Rimuru shuts her up. Like a good boss, Rimuru tells Diablo that everyone makes mistakes and that he should start thinking about how to fix them instead of beating himself up. Instantly getting motivated, Diablo promises he'll start working on the issue right away. Shuna then suggests they have Adalman tell them how to deal with the church, since he was a cardinal in the Luminous cult when he was alive. When Adalman arrives, he explains that the Holy Empire Lubelius has an anonymous emperor who is considered the voice of the god Luminous. The body that actually governs the nation is a group called the Imperial Agency. When Adalman was still alive, the Western Holy Church was just a branch of the Imperial Agency, and their only goal was spreading the faith of Luminism. Back then, they had no military force, but that changed one day. In order to protect Lubelius's people from monsters, the Temple Knights were founded. Then, as Lubelius's relations with other nations got worse, another force was founded. It was the Emperor's personal guard, the Master Rooks. They were extraordinarily strong and had the authority to order the Temple Knights around. Not even the Imperial Agency could give orders to them because they answered only to the Emperor. In line with this trend, the Church established another military force, the Crusaders. With time, the Church gained more and more power. The Daimon believes that the cause of this was the 7 days clergy. They are second only to the Emperor of Lubelius, but a Daimon thinks they're shady and accuses them of corrupting the church. They are also at fault for a Daimon ending up the way he is now, but he doesn't go into details. Most recently, Hinata took over the Crusaders and rebuilt them into the most powerful of knights. Currently, there are 2 camps governing Lubelius, the Crusaders and the Master Rooks. There are also the 10 Great Saints, who are comprised of only the strongest. They're all of the enlightened class, meaning that they have gained great power after overcoming many rigorous trials. It can be said they're the equivalent of demon lords, only they're humans. Among those saints, there are members of the Master Rooks known as the 3 Battle Sages and also the 6 leaders of the Crusaders. Finally, there's Hinata Sakaguchi herself. After that report, Rimuru starts putting together a plan to counter the threat from the church. Veldora is eager to fight, but Rimuru tells him that he's best used as the last line of defense, somehow convincing him that's a really cool position. Then, Benimaru announces that he's sending reinforcements to support Yamu and Admaris in the upcoming civil war. He's sending an army of 100 goblin riders led by Gobta, an additional 4,000 goblin warriors, Benimaru's ogre squad called Kirinai, and a unit of dragonutes led by Gabaru. Hearing this, Gobta is nervous, but Rimuru decides to send Ranga to go with him, which put the goblin's mind at ease. Yamu currently only has 5,000 soldiers, so not even Benimaru's forces are going to be enough to take on the enemy's 30,000 temple knights. Because of this, Rimuru considers nullifying Falmouth's debt, but Diablo is confident that he can turn the tides in Tempest's favor. He plans to find the person who actually killed Reheim and prove his innocence. Rimuru is concerned about him torturing the enemy soldiers for information, so Hakiru jumps in, saying he knows a way to subjugate Falmouth's forces without killing anyone. However, Rimuru gets worried, realizing that his council is doing really well even without him having to do anything. Saoi then gives an emergency report. 100 mounted crusaders have been sighted advancing toward Tempest, and he's assuming they're going to join Hinata. It's estimated that Hinata, the 4 knights following her, and this newly detected force are going to arrive in about 2 weeks. Rimuru still thinks there is a high chance that Hinata is only coming to talk with him, and he doesn't want to kill anyone if it isn't absolutely necessary. He announces to his council that they should focus on avoiding killing any of the holy knights while also avoiding the deaths of their friends. While the others are going to fight the Crusaders and the Saints, Rimuru is going to take on Hinata all by himself. Shin suggests that her squad, the goblins who were revived after dying in the war against Falmouth, should take on the 100 Crusaders. Since the revived can regenerate after they're wounded, it's unlikely that any normal attacks would kill them, so they're ideal for buying time. Benimaru also offers his Kirinai squad to support the revived and introduces everyone to the squad's leader, Gawa. Now, the only ones who are left to take on are the 4 presumably powerful knights following Hinata. Rimuru suggests that Benimaru and Shin should be enough to take them on, but suddenly everyone wants to join them. Then, Albus and Sufia interrupt the meeting, saying they want a piece of the action too. Seeing how eager they are to repay their debts to Rimuru for saving their homeland Euryzania, Rimuru lets them join Benimaru and Shin. Even though the goal is to end the upcoming war with as little loss of life as possible, Rimuru tells his subordinates that they should prioritize their friends' lives above all. If the Holy Knights turn out more dangerous than expected, Benimaru and the others are allowed to destroy them immediately. Meanwhile, Glenda, one of the Great Saints, meets up with Damrata, the Eastern merchant who deceived Hinata and got Tempest and the church into the mess they're in right now. We find out that the Eastern Empire's objective is to create chaos in the West so they can sell weapons and make a profit. After that, they want to mobilize their forces and attack the exhausted West. Damrata is talking to a mysterious man called Granville, who is the head of the Razzo family, which is also sitting in on the meeting. Even though Granville is a part of the Western Holy Church, he and Damrata share a goal: eliminating Hinata. Their biggest obstacle is Veldora, but Damrata concludes that he can be negotiated with now that he has been tamed by Rimuru. Damrata doesn't even consider the church as a threat, though, and even offers Granville to join him and control the West's economy with him. Granville refuses, not believing that Damrata is capable of something like that. Getting angry, Glenda points a gun at Damrata's head for underestimating Granville. Calming Glenda down, Granville continues the discussion. It turns out that Damrata and Granville have another common enemy except Hinata, Rimuru. Damrata wants to get rid of the slime demon lord because he keeps lowering the Eastern merchants' profit. First, he monopolized trade with the Dwarven Kingdom, and then he killed Clayman, who was a valuable business partner. Damrata is also in charge of eliminating Diablo and Admaris, so Granville orders Glenda to help him. The two are also counting on Rimuru killing Hinata, which is why they sabotaged his message to her. We find out that Damrata is actually one of the leaders of Cerberus, an organization controlling the East from the shadows. After Damrata leaves, Granville orders Glenda to use Cerberus's resources to stop Diablo. It seems like Granville has leverage over Glenda, but also Sar and Gregory of the Great Saints. Strangely, Granville's young granddaughter Maribel is also involved in the scheme. While Rimuru is busy with Hinata, Granville and his subordinates are going to use the opportunity to help King Edward of Falmouth win the civil war against Edmaris. After that, Edward is going to be indebted to Granville, making the Razzo family spread their influence further. Some time later, Rimuru recalls his fight against Hinata and wonders what her next move will be. At the same time, Hinata is sitting by a campfire with 4 of the 10 great saints sleeping near her. Earlier, the 4 found her while she was heading to Tempest and joined her. They love and respect her, so they secretly followed her. Reluctantly, she let them. When the 5 saints arrive in Bluemund, they're impressed by how far the kingdom has come. They're surprised by the quality of products offered in the shops and conclude that this huge improvement must have come from the kingdom's trade with Tempest. While they're walking down the street, Hinata is shocked and surprised to see a ramen shop. Since she's an otherworlder, she knows about ramen, but hasn't had it ever since she was transported to this world. Without explanation, she goes inside, taking the others with her. Hinata can barely believe her eyes when the waiter brings her a bowl of the familiar food she has been craving for so long. But the saints have no idea what they're looking at. Ignoring them completely, Hinata starts eating and she's overwhelmed by how delicious the ramen is. Seeing her reaction, the others start eating too and they can't believe that something this delicious exists. Realizing that Rimuru must have something to do with it, Hinata acknowledges how well he managed to recreate the taste. After that, they order some gyoza and the saints are surprised that Hinata is sensitive to hot food, even though she never shows any weaknesses otherwise. She denies that she's sensitive, but no one is convinced. In the end, everyone enjoys the gyoza, but Hinata ends up eating the last one before anyone else. Later that day, Hinata and the saints arrive in the great forest of Jura. They encounter a beautiful, perfectly clean road and there are no monsters in sight either. They expected the path to Tempest to be treacherous to humans, but instead they are greeted by 2 mild-mannered guards who stop them only to warn them that littering and fighting are forbidden. They also give them some directions to a watering hole and a police station. When they arrive at the watering hole, Hinata and the others are once again surprised. The water is completely free to drink and the grounds are perfectly maintained, looking like a modern campground. Hinata starts questioning how much of a threat Tempest and its inhabitants actually are to humans. Tempest is so different from what she expected that she's angry at herself for believing it's a place full of evil monsters. While they're staying at an inn that night, the saints talk about Rimuru and conclude that he's not so much a demon lord as he's just a really good ruler. They even think that there are things Lubelius can learn from Tempest. Hinata wonders why he would challenge her to a fight if he's so dedicated to improving relations between monsters and humans. The next day, Sawi reports that Hinata's group is expected to arrive that same evening. Since Hinata isn't trying to hide herself or her companions at all, Benimaru suspects that she's just a diversion and Rimuru agrees that could be one possibility. However, the 100 Crusaders aren't that obvious in their approach. They're using an old road and stealthily moving toward Tempest. But Sawi's squad managed to detect them. Among those Crusaders, there's Renard, one of the 10 great saints. Before he took off from Lubelius, the 7 Days clergy revealed to him that Hinata and the demon lord Roy Valentine were connected, which shocked him. They told him that Hinata wanted to get in contact with Rimuru because she wanted to work with him against the humans. Renard didn't believe them at first, since he trusts Hinata greatly. The 7 Days clergy then told him that there was only one way to test Hinata's trustworthiness. He has to kill Rimuru and then see her reaction. Renard was worried about Veldor, but the elders told him that there was no way the storm dragon had actually come back. They tell him that Rimuru must have lied to Hinata about it back when she had met him for the first time. Believing everything the elders told him, Renard swore he would kill Rimuru and prove Hinata's innocence. In the present, Renard, together with another saint called Guard, starts preparing the Crusaders for a siege on Tempest. As soon as they hear him say that, Shin's revived squad enters the scene. Renard orders his knights to attack and a battle breaks out. While Hinata's riding toward Tempest, Nicolaus, a cardinal of the Western Holy Church, contacts her telepathically. He tells her that the 3 battle sages secretly joined the civil war in the kingdom of Falmouth. Those 3 are Glenda, Gregory, and Sar. However, before he can finish his report, the telepathic message is interrupted. The only words that Hinata manages to hear are 7 days. At that moment, a commotion is heard nearby and Hinata feels Renard's presence. Quickly, she rides in that direction together with the other saints. We find out that Rimuru interfered with Nicolaus' message. He didn't know exactly what the message was, but didn't want to let his enemy communicate. Hinata turned and started riding toward Renard as soon as she got the message, so Rimuru and his allies misinterpreted that as her joining the fight against his forces. Now completely convinced that Hinata wants to fight him, Rimuru sends his warriors to the battlefield and goes out to engage Hinata. Meanwhile, a fierce battle between the revived and the Crusaders takes place. The Crusaders are shocked and confused by the revived getting back up and healing themselves even when they're being repeatedly struck down. The revived also have a special trick up their sleeves. They coated their weapons in a powerful, quick-acting sleeping drug. Then Rimuru, Benimaru, Sawe, Albus, and Sufi arrive on the scene. In a short while, the revived manage to defeat half of the Crusaders. Then, Shin orders Gabwa and Gobzo to join the battle, even if Rimuru's orders were for them to stand by and fight only if necessary. Still, she manages to motivate Gabwa and threaten Gobzo into fighting. When the two join the battlefield, Tempest's victory seems even more certain. Then, Hinata and the four saints finally arrive and they're shocked by what they see. They have no idea why the Crusaders, together with Renard and Guard, are fighting Rimuru's forces. Now that hostilities have begun, Hinata doubts that it'll be easy to negotiate with Rimuru. Seeing that Rimuru brought four of his strongest subordinates with him to the battlefield, she's convinced that he's planning to make them fight the four saints that are with her so that he can fight her on his own. On top of everything else going wrong, Shin also enters the battle. Finally, Hinata approaches Rimuru and the two prepare to fight. Meanwhile, for some reason Luminous Valentine is hugging a box containing a woman that seems frozen. Louis interrupts her to tell her that Hinata has attacked Rimuru without notifying them about it. He knows that the 7 days clergy has something to do with it. Luminous's servant, Gunther, tells him that his lady doesn't care about the trivial matters of humans, but Luminous herself stops him. Since she doesn't want to lose Hinata, she decides to do something about the situation. On the battlefield near Tempest, Shin lands with a bang. Confident in her power, she intends to take on both Renard and Guard at the same time. Before she attacks, she gives them a choice: submit to Rimuru or die. Immediately, Renard gives his answer. He sends 4 of the Crusaders to surround Shin and activate a holy field. Using magic, the 4 raise a pyramid-like barrier around her. Nearby, Rimuru tells Hinata that he now considers her and her allies as hostiles since they started attacking for no reason. Hinata tells him that she has no idea why Renard violated her orders and attacked. But Rimuru doesn't believe her. The church lied to him about things before, having framed Tempest for killing the Archbishop Reiheim. Surprisingly, Hinata doesn't even know that the Archbishop was killed. Rimuru is confused as to why Hinata reacted so violently to his message telling her he wants to peacefully coexist with the church. He's even prepared to hear her out if she first calls her forces off and sends them home. However, one of the saints with her tells Hinata that there's no guarantee he won't harm her. When Benimaru tells him to keep quiet and let Rimuru and Hinata talk, the saint attacks him and they clash swords. As tensions grow, Benimaru, Sufia, Albus, and Zoe pair up with the 4 saints and prepare to fight them, leaving Hinata and Rimuru alone to settle their beef. While the others are fighting, Shin prepares to fight the 2 great saints and the 4 crusaders. All at once, they fire a spell called Holy Cannon at her. However, she easily deflects all 6 blasts with her swords, even though that spell should be fatal to monsters. Somewhere else, Rimuru and Hinata fight fiercely too. Compared to their last duel, Hinata notices that Rimuru's power has increased to match even Luminous Valentine. Suddenly dropping her Dragon Buster, Hinata instead activates a holy armor composed of spirit power and conjures a different, even more powerful-looking sword. Looking at the sword, Rimuru has Raphael analyze it. It turns out it's an extremely powerful legendary sword. Covering his own sword in violet flames, Rimuru clashes with Hinata once again. Nearby, Shin gives the Holy Knights a final chance to surrender to Rimuru. Rimuru gave her the order to avoid fighting anyone, so she tries negotiating with the saints, but Guard refuses to listen and interrupts her. Instantly, Shin fires off a powerful magic beam to warn him, punching a hole in his ear and destroying a large rock behind him. Guard is furious, but Renard wants to hear Shin out, convinced of how powerful she is. Satisfied, Shin tells them about her idea. She'll let the 2 hit them with their most powerful attacks, and if she can withstand them, they're going to peacefully surrender to her. Renard is surprised, realizing that Shin really doesn't want to fight them, but Guard convinces him not to lower his guard against their enemy. Guard orders the 4 Crusaders to combine their spirit power and power up his already powerful flame spell. With a smile on her face, Shin activates a multi-layer barrier and uses her enhanced senses to easily cut Guard's spell in half. Witnessing her power, Renard understands that Shin is much too strong for them to take on, but Guard won't give up. Renard tries stopping him before Shin kills them all, but Guard won't listen to him. Even though Guard has a short temper, he's usually an honorable man, so Renard is confused as to why he would act like this. Jumping into the air, Shin easily shatters the holy field, leaving the saints in disbelief. They realize that she has an extremely powerful skill called Certain Outcome that enables her to produce any outcome she wants. Finally, Renard and Guard completely give up and surrender. When Shin tells him that Rimuru had no intention of fighting Hinata at all, Renard realizes that he has been manipulated by the 7 days clergy. Horrified, he realizes that if he hadn't led the Crusaders to Tempest, the battle wouldn't have broken out at all. Nearby, Rimuru is having a hard time fighting Hinata. Even though Rimuru is stronger than when she fought him in the past, she understands that she's much more talented than he is and she has much more experience. Raphael tells Rimuru that Hinata's sword can't kill him in one hit, but it could severely drain his energy since it has the ability to break his multi-layer barrier. He could die if he gets hit several times. Rimuru then decides that he should wait until she's tired and then strike, since he doesn't get tired at all. Suddenly, Hinata's strikes become faster and Rimuru realizes that she's luring him into spots where her attacks are expected to land. Completely helpless to do anything but frantically dodge Hinata's sword, Rimuru begs Raphael to do something. Thinking about it, Raphael acquires the skill Predict Future attack for him. Now, Rimuru can see Hinata's sword strikes before they land and he manages to parry them effectively enough to get away from her. Then, the four saints return, all of them having been defeated by Rimuru's friends. Seeing this, Hinata suggests that their next round be the final one. She warns him that the technique she's going to use is very dangerous and asks him if he's sure he wants to continue their fight. Analyzing her, Raphael tells Rimuru that she actually has no desire to kill him. Hearing this, Rimuru is confused, having been convinced that killing him is the exact reason she came to meet him. Rimuru then tells Hinata that, if he can withstand her extremely dangerous attack, she will have to admit her loss. Smiling, Hinata tells him she knew he'll say that. Rimuru makes her promise she won't mess with his country again if she loses, and Hinata agrees. To Rimuru's surprise, she tells him that she had been hoping to have a discussion about their nation's futures and she only fought him because he asked her to. Rimuru is confused, but he can't stop her from charging up her sword with spirit power and attacking him. Analyzing Hinata's attack, Raphael tells Rimuru that it's unavoidable and indefensible. She recommends sacrificing Rimuru's ultimate skill Beelzebub to offset the attack, and Rimuru does it in the last possible second. Fortunately, the sacrifice of his skill enables him to emerge unscathed. Afterwards, Hinata laughs heartily and calls him amazing. She admits her defeat and the fighting finally ends. Suddenly, the Dragon Buster sword that Hinata dropped rises from the ground ominously. Realizing that the 7 Days clergy is trying to do something, Hinata stands in front of Rimuru just in time to shield him from a powerful energy blast. In Nidal, the domain between Falmouth and Tempest where Admaris and Yamu reside, Damrata thinks about his schemes. He counted on Rimuru abandoning Yamu, but he ended up sending powerful reinforcements to him instead. Now, Yamu and Admaris are taking on King Edward's army and Damrata decides it's time to give up on his plans. There's still the matter of defeating Diablo, but Damrata gives up on this too, realizing that the demon is much more powerful than he expected him to be. He decides there's nothing else to do but to leave Falmouth and hope that Edward is somehow going to deal with Diablo using the demon hunters he sent him. Meanwhile, King Edward and his army set up camp in Admaris domain. The 3 battle sages are also among their numbers. Edward feels optimistic, feeling like he can take Admaris and Diablo on easily. He immediately orders a preemptive strike on the town where Yamu resides, telling a knight called Gaston to attack with an advance party of 5,000 men. Sar suggests Grigori join the party too, intending for him to attack Diablo. Soon, the advance party rides out toward their goal. However, Diablo is actually heading toward King Edward. Seeing the advance party advance in the direction of Yamu, he contacts Hakiru and tells him to take care of them. Hakiru decides to send Ranga, Gobta and Gabaru's units to attack the party and capture Grigori as a bargaining chip. Suddenly, Diablo lands right in the middle of King Edward's camp. He greets his enemies with flawless etiquette, but the knights surround him instantly. Casting a barrier, Diablo separates the civilians in the camp and the soldiers. Sar regrets sending Grigori with the advance party, but there's nothing he can do, now he and Glinda are the strongest around. King Edward welcomes Diablo without a care in the world, but the demon tells him he has a warning for him. If he doesn't withdraw his troops at once and reconcile with Yamu, he will be spared from unnecessary terror. Edward just laughs, telling him that a demon like him has no business interfering with his kingdom. He tells Diablo that he knows all about him conspiring with Admaris to swindle Falmouth out of double the amount of reparation. Arrogantly, he accuses Rimuru of being a money-hungry schemer who is inciting war just for his own profit. The more Diablo listens to Edward, the angrier he gets. Acting like he has the upper hand, Edward shows Diablo a crystal ball, telling him that he knows all about him killing Reheim to keep him quiet. Inside the crystal ball, there's a recording of Reheim begging for forgiveness and telling someone he never intended to betray them. It turns out that Glinda brought him that recording. Edward claims that he's not afraid of Diablo since he has the upper hand on him now. Sick of the king's ramblings, Diablo tells him he should test him to see if a human can stop being afraid of him. If even one person in the encampment manages to conquer their fear of him, he'll admit his defeat. However, he has never once experienced defeat in his entire existence. Then, Edward orders the demon hunters that Damrata sent him to attack Diablo. The hunters emerge from the shadows and tie Diablo up with chains, gloating about how they've defeated many archdemons like him, announcing that they're going to destroy his physical body. They channel a powerful lightning spell into the chains. After they're done, Diablo laughs at them, telling them their attack is nothing before the likes of him. Then Diablo begins his test. He unleashes his demon lord aura, and as soon as he does it, people inside the barrier he raised start losing consciousness one by one. Most of the ones who are still awake are cowering in fear, but there are still 3 people standing: Glenda, Sar, and one of the demon hunters. Diablo then reveals that he's one of the primordial demons and not just an archdemon, as the demon hunters thought. When the last standing demon hunter realizes how powerful Diablo is, he drops to his knees and starts panicking like everyone else. Now, only Glenda and Sar are left standing. The 2 saints acknowledge Diablo's power, but they are still prepared to fight him. Sar takes out his sword and charges at Diablo, but the demon easily blocks his attacks. Realizing that Diablo isn't all talk, Sar gets scared. Glenda then attacks Diablo with one of her throwing knives and actually hits him, but the demon doesn't even care, easily pulling out the knife from his body. He tells her that physical attacks don't work on him at all. Sar then powers up and slashes Diablo across his shoulder with his special Demon Slayer sword, but that does nothing either. Realizing she's out of her depth, Glenda simply runs away as fast as she can. Desperate, Sar decides to at least try and buy some time until Grigori returns. At the same time, Grigori and the rest of Edward's army runs into Ranga. Grigori decides to take on the wolf and tells Gaston to lead his forces against Gabaru and Gobta's units that are still on their way. However, Grigori has no idea how powerful Ranga is. Completely ignoring the saint, the monster wolf causes chaos among the troops, launching tens of soldiers into the air at a time. Then, Ranga charges at Grigori and the saint prepares his massive axe. By the time Gobta and Gabaru arrive, there's literally no one left to fight anymore. Ranga is playing around with Grigori and Gobta actually has to stop him so he doesn't kill him by accident. Approaching the helpless Gaston, Sauka tells him she won't pursue them if they withdraw their troops. Faced with the monster's overwhelming power, Gaston immediately orders his men to fall back and they all run away in a panic. At the camp, Sar is desperately attacking Diablo, but nothing works. He's counting on Grigori coming back, but he has no idea that he's completely defeated. Sar prepares his ultimate killing blow and lets loose, but Diablo easily dismantles his magic before he can even activate it. Sar realizes that such a powerful demon would have no reason to kill Rayheim. Thinking about everything that happened, he realizes who actually killed the Archbishop. At that moment, a portal opens and 3 members of the 7 Days clergy appear. Combining their magic power, they burn all the civilians outside of Diablo's barrier, getting rid of anyone who could have realized that they killed Rayheim. At the same time, Hinata's chest is pierced by the magic beam that was launched out of the Dragon Buster sword. Rimuru tries healing her using one of his potions, but it turns out that she has a high resistance to magic and is unconsciously negating the potion's effects. The saints hurry to help her, but they're all suddenly restrained by magic rings appearing out of thin air. 2 members of the 7 Days clergy appear through a portal, announcing that they're here to kill Hinata for violating their orders. Then, Renard and Guard appear, having figured everything out. Renard says that the clergy fooled him, having planned to get rid of Hinata from the start. Before he can finish his sentence, though, Guard stabs him with his spear. Guard accuses Renard of conspiring with the traitor Hinata and betraying everyone. Analyzing Guard, Raphael detects that he was also the one who shot Hinata using the Dragon Buster. Rimuru orders Shin to reveal Guard's true identity, but he does it himself. Ripping off his disguise, he reveals himself as yet another member of the 7 Days clergy. Diablo then reports to Rimuru that he found out that the 7 Days clergy killed Rayheim and suggests that he should kill them all. Rimuru considers it, but tells him to first make sure that definite proof goes out that they killed the Archbishop. Diablo tells him there are some reporters who found out and Rimuru tells him to protect them. Rimuru then orders Benimaru, Sawe and Shin to restrain the clergy members and use force if necessary. The clergy members tell him that he'd cause an international incident if he attacked them, but Rimuru announces that he figured them out. The saints then hear that the clergy tampered with Rimuru's message to the church and also killed Rayheim. However, the clergy members just laugh, saying that now they'll be able to get rid of both Rimuru and Hinata at once. Flying into the sky, the 3 clergy members start casting a complicated magic circle. Benimaru and Sawe do their best to stop them, but none of their attacks can harm the old men. Then, Shin jumps into the air and attacks with her sword. Using certain outcome, she cracks the clergy's magic circle to their disbelief. Raphael tells Rimuru that Shin could even harm him if she wanted to. Desperate, the 3 clergymen attack with an incomplete version of the spell they were planning to use, intending to kill everyone aside from themselves. Suddenly, Raphael announces that she's reactivating Rimuru's ultimate skill Beelzebub, spreading outside of Rimuru's body. Beelzebub absorbs the entirety of the clergy members' attack. Rimuru is surprised because he thought that Beelzebub was sacrificed in his fight against Hinata, but Raphael reveals that she has made a backup copy of it. Then, the clergy members combine their power and attack once again, casting an incredibly complex spell called Infinity Disintegration. They trap Rimuru and Hinata in a mess of magic circles. Rimuru realizes that the spell is too powerful for even Beelzebub to absorb, but Raphael already has a solution ready. She creates a skill called Absolute Guard and Rimuru quickly activates it. When the dust settles, the 7 days clergy members can't believe their eyes. No living thing should be able to withstand a direct hit from their disintegration spell, but Rimuru is perfectly fine. Benimaru, Shin and the others prepare to fight back, but the clergy members announce that they're withdrawing. Suddenly, a gigantic white door appears and luminous Valentine appears, together with Louis. She apologizes for causing so much trouble for him and Rimuru realizes that she was the god Luminous all this time. Meanwhile, it turns out that Diablo managed to save all the reporters and civilians from the 7 days clergy members' attempt to kill them. The 3 men prepare to attack Diablo. Diablo announces that he's going to save everyone from the clergymen, but only under the condition the reporters make the truth of the Archbishop's killers known far and wide. Smiling, Diablo promises to protect them all, except King Edward. Scowling, he tells Edward that he insulted Rimuru, which deserves a fate worse than death. Begging for forgiveness, Edward offers Diablo anything he wants, even the throne of the King of Falmouth. Realizing that it would be useful to Rimuru if Yamu could become the King of Falmouth, he tells Edward that he will forgive him. Immediately, Edward announces that he's appointing Yamu as his successor. While Diablo was talking, the 7 days clergy members constructed a powerful-looking magic circle, but the demon doesn't look threatened. The 3 men cast the Trinity Break spell and bombard Diablo with countless magic blasts. Completely unfazed, Diablo snaps his fingers and uses his skill to spare time. Now, the clergy members are trapped in a black abyss, unable to use magic, compressing the space more and more. Diablo squishes the 3 men until they're dead. Meanwhile, Louis introduces Luminous as the principal deity of the Luminist faith, and the saints are surprised, having no idea about this. Luminous then starts resurrecting Hinata using a powerful holy magic spell. While she's getting healed, Hinata remembers her past. When she was still a high schooler, Hinata was summoned from her original world to this one. Her father was a violent gambler who was frequently abusing her mother. She wanted to restore her broken home, but one day, her father couldn't take it anymore and threw himself into the sea. After that, her mother's heart broke and she went mad. With this, all the things Hinata cherished were taken away from her. Getting sick of being the one everything is always taken from, she gained the ability Usurper when she was taken to another world. Using that skill, she could finally be the one who would take things from others. Beginning to believe that survival of the fittest was the most important rule of the world, she decided to become strong and immediately gained skills that would help her with that. When she was summoned, she was attacked by bandits, but she fought them all off using those skills. Then, she met Shizu. In the present, Hinata wakes up. Rimuru is staring at her because he's worried, but Hinata interprets that as him thinking indecent things about her. As Luminous is preparing to chastise the 7 days clergy, Diablo reports to Rimuru that he managed to deal with the clergy members who attacked him. Furious, Luminous announces that she's going to execute the remaining clergy members. Using a skill called Death Blessing, she extinguishes their lives in the blink of an eye. With the crisis over, Rimuru invites everyone to a place where they can calmly talk about the future of Tempest and Lubelius. Meanwhile, in Lubelius, the last surviving member of the 7 days clergy is discovered by Nicolaus the Cardinal. Nicolaus tells the man that he found signs of tampering on the crystal ball Rimuru sent as a message to Hinata. It turns out that he knows that the god Luminous really exists, but he was pretending not to because Hinata kept it a secret. He actually doesn't care about the 7 days clergy or Luminism. Using a disintegration spell, Nicolaus instantly destroys the last remaining member of the clergy for trying to harm Hinata. In the Razzo family's mansion, Granville's spirit returns to his body. It turns out that he was controlling the last member of the clergy. His granddaughter Maribel concludes that Tempest is much too dangerous to leave alone. She claims that Rimuru wants to control the finances of the entire world, so he must be crushed as soon as possible. We find out that she's called Maribel of Greed, implying that she's a big deal for some reason. While the Razzo family is seething, Rimuru, Hinata, Luminous, and everyone else returns to Tempest. Veldora receives them and blurts out that Luminous is actually a demon lord, shocking the saints once again. Absolutely furious, Luminous takes out a powerful-looking red sword and punishes him. She continues brutalizing him with advanced spells that can hurt even him until she's had enough, which is only at sunset. Watching Veldora scream in pain, the saints can't believe that's the storm dragon they were so afraid of all this time. After all that, Luminous and Rimuru became friends. The misunderstanding with Hinata was finally resolved and Tempest was accepted by the western provinces. After everything was settled, everyone had fun relaxing at Tempest's hot springs.